The Rise of Iceland. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 226, North American Storm, 2. The land of North America is vast, with endless animals such as bison, reindeer, and thousands of tribes. Although these Indians do not have a national concept, they are distinguished by tribal names because of the climatic environment and rich products. The Indians in North America, regardless of their size, are actually based on gathering and hunting as their basic way of living, and then planting some crops appropriately, which is a primitive safari civilization, so it is a martial art. Very heavy European colonists in Central America and South America easily occupied the land and enslaved the natives, but it was very difficult for the North American colonists. The main thing was not only the fierce and combative native enemies they faced, but also the environment. Bad supply is difficult at present. Vinland occupies the most land, and the native Indians under its jurisdiction and contact also have more than a dozen large and small tribes. The Hurons, Iroquois and Beoducs are directly included in the Viking raids ruling system. Some of the Abenaki and Cree were included. The territory belonging to the Abenaki people between the Iroquois area and Vinland Island is not much smaller than that of the Iroquois area, but it is not suitable for planting, and the Abenaki people cannot easily deal with small tribes, so Vinland has always maintained a friendly business relationship with the Abenaki, and at the same time, Labrador also hired some Abenaki as mercenaries to conquer the Eskimo in the north. Now that the governor of New France, Champlain, has discovered gold and silver mines in the 5 Hubei provinces, and is planning to use the Chippewa people to mine the minerals, Olaf will never allow it. However, if Vinland takes the shot, even if he can the veins, he will also offend the Kingdom of France. Now France is the mainstay of the Protestant alliance in Europe. In the future, it will lead its allies to victory and use Iceland's strength to compete with France, which is the largest European power. It is really not a wise move to be right now. Denmark is already an enemy of Iceland, and the relationship between Britain and Denmark is also a potential enemy of Iceland. If France becomes an enemy again, I am afraid it will be difficult for Iceland to survive in Europe. Olaf immediately thought of a good strategy to drive wolves and fight tigers. Although he had used it once before, using the Iroquois to deal with the Massachusetts Gulf Company, the current Abenaki can still use it, even after using the Abenaki, can also take advantage of the situation to bring the Abenaki people into the slave system of Viking raiding. Olaf's wishful thinking clinked, and after speaking with Tom and the others, several teenagers looked at Olaf in admiration, and were amazed. That afternoon, Gilson sent a guard to Backens to summon Governor Blackstone. 2 days later, Blackstone brought 2 soldiers to visit him. Olaf held a banquet at home to invite Blackstone to dinner. During the banquet, he told him that he wanted to invite the Abenaki people to deal with the Chippewas and the French. Blackstone did not dare to neglect Master Olaf, and immediately expressed his willingness to go to Buna personally. The leader of the Giron must ask him to take action. After admiring Blackstone, Olaf said that he could give the Abenaki any favorable conditions, as long as they can defeat the Chippewas and the French, just like before. The spears and swords in the warehouse can be given to the Chippewas first. A batch. Blackstone left Vinland with a boat of supplies and soldiers the next morning, and went to the Abenaki territory on the south bank of the St. Lawrence River. Before Vinland used iron weapons to hire Iroquois to deal with the British, the surrounding tribes knew well, but the demise of the Iroquois was due to excessive expansion, and at the same time it was at war with the Hurons, the French and even the Vinlands. Knowing that, except for the French, no one suspects that the failure of the Iroquois was taken advantage of by the Vinland. For the Abenaki people, Wenland is a wealthy and powerful existence. As a governor of Wenland, Blackstone took the initiative to ask for cooperation. The Abenaki people accepted it in their hearts after a day of negotiations, after Blackstone promised to give them several benefits, and delivered thousands of iron spears in advance. The Abenaki agreed to work with the Chippewas and divided the land with the Wenland. After the war, Blackstone received a satisfactory answer and reported to Olaf as soon as possible in the city of Herat. The Abenaki people thought they could expand after receiving Vinland's support in strong and sharp iron tools. Under the command of the leader, they were able to expand. The warriors and young men quickly gathered in 3 or 4 tribes on the south bank of the St. Lawrence River in less than 5 days. The Abenaki people assembled a team of 7 or 8,000 people, each holding iron tools. Among them, some of them had been traded with Wenlin over the past few years, and some were gifted by Blackstone. These 7 or 8,000 elite warriors held them. Ironware, wearing leather armor, and tens of thousands of ordinary civilians, carrying bows and arrows on their backs, and holding wooden sticks inlaid with stones. After the assembly of the Abenaki people, they carried earthen jars full of food, rowed up the wooden boat upstream, and entered the territory of the Chippewa people relying on 3 or 4 times more iron weapons than the Chippewas. The Abenaki warriors descended like a tiger and rushed into the unprepared Chippewa tribe to kill them. By the time the Chippewas reacted, they had been defeated by 7 or 8. The tribe can only organize tens of thousands of male warriors and more than 5,000 young women. There were also nearly 100 French musketeers in Chippewa's camp, led by Captain Thiers, but in the face of thousands of Abenaki warriors, the French musketeers were unable to stop more than twice. The final outcome is that the French musketeers were all killed. The leader of the Chippewas were also killed and captured. The vast land of the Chippewas was completely occupied by the Abenaki, and tens of thousands of Chippewas were taken down. For the slaves of the Abenaki, when the bad news reached Quebec, Champlain fainted instantly after everyone, and the Bishop of Quebec brought Champlain to the bed and put 8 ounces of blood. Champlain finally woke up slowly. "Your Excellency. How are you, Bishop O'Neill, a new Messiah this year?" asked, lying in front of Champlain with his mouth full of yellow teeth. Champlain became a bit dull after being released with more than 200 cc of blood, and even his memory was biased. He muttered, "Ellie. Where are you?" The men around Champlain froze, staring at each other, and could not speak. After a long time, Champlain finally recovered, and sighed dumbly, "Hey. Ellie eloped with my guard in spring, Bishop O'Neill. Do you know? The gold mine I worked so hard to find was snatched by the Abenaki. I'm afraid it will be known by Olaf and others in Vinland in the future. I have been in Quebec for more than 10 years. Now I have not been able to make any contribution to His Majesty Louis. God." Champlain became more excited as he talked, and his pale face became a little red. Since the rise of Vinland, Champlain has been frightened every day. Since this spring, his lover and his guard ran away in a trance. This serious illness has made him even more so. He had the idea of returning to the embrace of Jehovah. Seeing that the governor is not right, O'Neill hurriedly stretched out his hand to press Champlain. After hearing the words, he was relieved for a long time, but the effect was not good. Finally, he said, "Your Excellency, you are the Prime Minister and the most trusted person of Your Majesty. Now the Prime Minister. The dominant anti-Shinra alliance has taken the upper hands in the all-European war. The Swedish line has already taken the northern part of Germany, and the army is directed at Austria. We are about to win. You only need to wait until Your Majesty, and after the Prime Minister wins, he will naturally have spare capacity to send troops to support us." "What the bishop said," said the guard next to Champlain. "You are the founder of New France and the symbol of Quebec. You must keep your body. www.uxiaspit.com. Only if you are healthy can you lead us to persevere. Go down, that's right. Let's persevere under the leadership of Master Champlain. Whether Vikings, Vinlandians or native Indians will be the ghosts of our French cavalry." "Yes, my lord," said. After half a day, Champlain brought up some spirits. His keen sense of fighting in primitive society and French upper-class society for decades told him that perhaps it is not easy for the Abenaki to attack the Chippewa. The Abenakis attacked Chippewa. Everyone has iron tools. Even though they have gained too much from trading with Vinland for many years, not to mention that since they came to North America to establish New France, the Abenakis have never attacked Chip aggressively. "Tile people, is it Wenlin?" Hiss. Champlain suddenly thought of a possibility. That is, Wenlin couldn't bear to annex himself and the surrounding tribes. This idea occupied all of Champlain's thoughts as soon as he appeared, and he was determined in his heart because of this incident. Similar to the Iroquois killing of the Massachusetts Company in the early summer of last year, he had always suspected that there was Vinland behind the incident. At this time, Champlain's heart was cold by comparison. After thinking for a long time, Champlain's heart seemed to be turbulent, but on the surface it was very calm. He felt that his fragile body had come to life again, and he whispered unconsciously, "Send someone to Wenland to talk about Olaf's tone. If this matter was his intention, we might also. Hey. Now the weather is getting colder, and there were no French ships coming back years ago. If it was Olaf's intention, we would not be able to get out of the St. Lawrence River. It's Chapter 227, North American Storm, 3. No money to read novels? Give you cash or points, and receive it in one day within a limited time. Follow the public number book Friends Base Camp, get it for free. On October 30th, the north wind whistled and snow fell. Olaf wears a polar bear leather jacket sewn by his mother, Catelyn, sitting in the chamber, and Tom and Solek, Halleck, Yaluki, Harry, Val, Erickson and others are sitting beside him. Opposite the people of Olaf is the person in charge of the various agricultural forts under the city of Grote. They are all left behind Vikings, or Hader's private slaves, and they are the most loyal and reliable people. Now the persons in charge of these agricultural castles are telling Olaf one by one about the maturity of the economic planting of the plots they are responsible for at present. The vegetables have been picked. In addition to personal consumption and pickling pickles, there are many privately owned Viking vegetables purchased by Olaf. He plans to pickle all the vegetables he bought and the vegetables from his family's land into pickles, sold to the natives of the North American continent in exchange for Vinland Island, the Iroquois Plain, and the Huron region have grown sweet potatoes, corn, etc., and are ready for harvesting. The Vikings only occupy more than 20% of the land in the three places, more than 20%. The land does not need to be dealt with by Olaf. Naturally, Vikings' family slaves will harvest it. However, the large amount of remaining land requires Olaf to coordinate the slaves and white slaves in his hands, and the Vikings who need work to harvest. The most indispensable thing in the original Vinland is the capable slave coolies. 1/3 of them are skilled farmers. However, due to the eastern expedition of Iceland, there is a serious shortage of farmers in Vinland. Although there are still Iroquois slaves and Huron slaves, many of them, but as a safari tribe, they are not proficient in agriculture, so this harvest will still focus on the existing white slaves, private slaves and Vikings in Vinland. They can mobilize hundreds of Iroquois and Hurons. Slave assistance. After discussion, Olaf finally decided to organize a team of 500 Vikings and white slaves to go to the Iroquois and Huron districts to be responsible for the grain harvesting, while Vinland's grain harvesting was slowly advanced by the remaining people. After the matter was finalized, Tom and the others went to notify the relevant personnel. As soon as Olaf stretched his waist, he saw Gilson walk in quickly with Blackstone. The host, Master, Olaf nodded and invited the two to sit down, and then asked, "How about the conquest of the Chippewa?" Hirschi's face was full of weather and chapped lips, and he smiled and said, "With our support, the Abenaki people are very brave and capable. After more than a week of conquests, they wiped out the Chippewa warriors at noon yesterday and captured Chip. The vast land of the Wa people also enslaved half of their population, and the rest migrated to the west and escaped. I told them to guard the territory and return to report to you immediately." "Okay," Olaf smiled and gave a high five, then asked, "What about the French?" "What's the reaction?" "The thing is as we knew it before. The Chippewa settlement was discovered a gold and silver mine. Captain Champlain Petiers and nearly 100 musketeers were stationed there, but they were all killed by the Abenaki. Now the Chippewa's land and gold and silver mines have also fallen into our hands, Master, or let the Abenaki people destroy Quebec too. Anyway, the remaining musketeers in New France will not be there. 300 people can easily be wiped out." After Blackstone finished speaking, he waited quietly for Olaf to decide. Olaf thought for a while and shook his head. "If the news is leaked, we will become the public enemy of North America and even the entire American continent, and France will become our enemy. Too risky, and yesterday Champlain's the envoy also made a special trip to visit me. I guess Champlain was suspicious." Blackstone was about to persuade again. Olaf suddenly smiled and said, "But if we can wipe out Champlain and the others, we can merge the area of New France with the Iroquois, Huron, and Labrador. It's really tempting. Besides, Champlain has already suspected that if we don't do it, we will do it. Wealth are in danger. Vinland is the stronghold of our Vikings and the foundation for the rise of Iceland. We must manage it well and seize all opportunities to grow and develop. New France will be annexed sooner or later. Now we have the opportunity to take a gamble. Come. Blackstone, you and Gilson go there in person. You must do it thoroughly and cleanly. You can't let a Frenchman go. After the French are cleared, the insiders in the Abenaki will also be dealt with." Olaf looked solemn and determined. He stretched out his big hand to hold the palms of Blackstone and Gilson, and said in a deep voice, "Vinland's rise and fall will rest on both of you, so we must deal with it." Gilson and Blackstone knelt and agreed, And then Gilson hesitantly asked, "Master, how many people shall we take? I'm afraid there are quite a few Abenaki people who know about it. Just in case, use poison." Blackstone interrupted Gilson and said, "I heard that the young master poisoned the enemy with food made from green potatoes when he rescued Master Heir in Iceland. Some small black potatoes. You can invite the Abenaki people to dinner in the name of thanks, and kill them with poisoned potatoes." "Master, do you think it's okay?" Olaf glanced at Blackstone appreciatively, and then hesitated. "The toxin of green potatoes is not too powerful, and it takes a large dose to kill. However, depending on the medical level of the native Indians, if only 2 mouthfuls cause diarrhea, I am afraid that I will not survive. Actually, I heard that the British in Virginia once sent blankets stained with smallpox virus to the Indian chiefs. Native Indians have no resistance to smallpox at all." Hishi's face changed. He seemed to think of the tragic condition of his family group suffering from smallpox for decades, and nodded. "I see. Master, please give me some smallpox virus powder." Because Olaf developed the method of inoculation for human pox, the smallpox virus has almost disappeared in recent years, so it is impossible to find the smallpox virus. Blackstone and Gilson, but Olaf has the powder made by smallpox patients with mucus wounds and scabs. It is full of viruses. Blackstone and Gilson only need to bring some powder. I believe the high-level Abenaki people will be able to catch them all in one go. Olaf's heart praised Hishi's alertness. He smiled and took out a ceramic bottle from his desk and handed it to Hishi, saying, "This virus cannot withstand high temperatures. Don't add it to food. It can spread through the mouth and nose and blood." "You see, do." After Blackstone and Gilson agreed, they went down to the Chippewa territory and met the leader of the Abenaki. In the eyes of Blackstone and Gilson, the chieftain of the Abenaki people was already dead, so in order to persuade them to destroy Quebec City and sweep New France, the two ran the train with their mouth full and promised to give Abenaki personnel. After being completed, they can have the same high status and full strength as the Vikings, and can get muskets and steeds. How innocent the Abenaki people who have not been beaten by the society are. They completely believed the words of Blackstone and Gilson, and quickly issued orders to count tens of thousands of elite warriors. Quebec City on the north bank of the Lawrence River. Quebec City has a strong city wall and 2 24-pounders, but there are only more than 500 defenders. They climbed into the city 3 days after the Abenaki warriors attacked and broke Quebec City. There were originally 3 armed merchant ships in the port of Quebec City. One was a French merchant ship, and the remaining 2 were Quebec's defense forces. However, the Abenaki, who as reminded by Blackstone and Gilson, took the lead in sending people to dive and climb onto the ship. The sailors reserved by the French died, and the people in Quebec City lost any opportunity to escape before the Abenaki attacked Quebec City. Champlain, who has bled 3 times in a row, was dead. After the city was broken, Champlain's confidants, subordinates, and even the bishop of the church were all beheaded and killed. Hundreds of women, children and men in Quebec City did not leave a living. After Quebec City was breached, www.uxiaspit.com, the Abenakis continued to attack many strongholds in New France eastward, and they still killed all the remaining French without leaving a living. By mid-November, New France completely disappeared, and hundreds of French people became the dead souls of the Abenaki. However, the Abenaki also quickly contracted the disease. A large number of illnesses and deaths began from the leaders, chiefs and other high-level leaders. In less than a month, more than half of the Abenaki were sick, and more than the number of deaths was exceeded. 1/3. This is because the Abenaki had been in contact with the French in Vinland before, causing many people to survive smallpox and have antibodies. Otherwise the situation would be more serious. When the temperature is getting lower and lower, by December, the powerful Abenaki tribe has fallen apart. Only less than 30% of the original number have survived the illness, and quite a few people are still sick and suffering torment. Blackstone and Gilson returned to Heir City before December 1st and reported the situation to Olaf, who had just finished harvesting food. Olaf unfolded the map, drew with charcoal on it, and then pointed to the vast land that had cultivated Vinland, Labrador, the St. Lawrence River to the north and south shores of the Great Lakes, and said, "Now we are writing land already has several times the territory before, and the pure territory is already larger than France and Germany combined." HTTPS, Genius only remembers the address of this site in 1 second. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 228, North American Storm, 4. After several years of business development, Vinland previously occupied the entire eastern part of the Labrador Peninsula. the Iroquois Plain and the Huron territories in addition to Vinland Island. Although the area is not small, the territories are not fully connected all day. The Labrador Peninsula is now basically completely occupied, and New France, Abenaki territory, Chippewa territory are annexed, and the entire Vinland territory is completely connected into a large effective whole. After Olaf modified the map, the prototype of Vinland's territory appeared, probably in the northeast and east of the Great Lakes, north and west of the future city Boston, and New York to Lake Erie, the easternmost part of the entire North American continent. The area is about 3 million square kilometers. France and Germany together, the largest period is just 1 million. If you simply care about the area, Vinland already has an area comparable to the Ottoman Empire. It's just that the area of the country's territory is not blindly as large as possible. The most fundamental node is the effective area, which is the land where 11 people live and can develop agricultural industries. Among the large amounts of territory that Vinland now occupies, the St. Lawrence River the north occupies more than half, and the climatic environment of the Labrador Peninsula cannot be planted, nor is it suitable for large populations to live in. Therefore, the area that can be fully utilized in Vinland is very small. France and Germany have more than half of the land that can be used for farmland, and there are more minerals, so they have a large population and the basis for the development of industry, which is the basis of a powerful country. Olaf knows very well that Vinland's current shortcomings are its small population and serious insufficient resource development. Even if his father swallows Iceland, there are still more than 70,000 Vikings and more than 200,000 Indian slaves. It really wants to develop to a level that can be achieved. It takes more than 20 years to compare to the level of ordinary European countries. Looking at the drawings that Olaf drew, Gilson and Blackstone didn't have a very intuitive feeling, because they were both natives of North America and didn't know the European powers, but Tom and Harry, who came over after hearing the sound, exclaimed an exclamation, "Olaf! Do we have such a large territory in Vinland now? God! Compared to the current Vinland, Iceland is too small." "Yes. With a vast land of North America that can be explored, what are we doing back to Europa?" Olaf looked at the two good partners and smiled. "Although North America is very good, we can't live the life of primitive people who drink blood. Only by keeping in touch with Europe can we master new technology and have advanced weapons to defend ourselves. At the same time, you can wear the best clothes, the most delicious food, get the spices, get the advanced culture." Olaf's words made Tom understand, and Harry, who has a black beard and hair, nodded and said, "We are civilized people in the center of the world. We colonize North America but cannot forget the foundations of Europe." "I understand. Olaf." "Yes. At that time, we felt very happy to be with you. Really, Iceland has been a boring and repeated life for hundreds of years. If it weren't for you and His Royal Highness Heir, we would live a plain life in Iceland like our ancestors. Getting married and having children. Then we die. But now, we have a rich life, and we have great powers, and we have established a deed that is even more outstanding than our ancestors. This feeling is really amazing." Harry's feelings aroused the sympathy of several people. They all spoke of their loyalty to Olaf. Olaf's face was full of smiles, and at the same time he felt warm in his heart. After a while, he waved his hand to stop it, and then said, "We Vikings, the ancestors, walked out of the embrace of the Scandinavian goddess," referring to Scandinavia, "and crossed the Baltic Sea all the way southward, conquering France, Germany, Great Britain and other regions, affecting the entire Europa and the entire world. Now we have to come to America like our ancestors, conquer Vinland, conquer Labrador, conquer every corner of North America, and create our own era and achievements." Because of his mature soul, Olaf has shown superior language skills since he was a child. This is a small reputation in Iceland. After so many years, he can be trained so that his speech has the ability to infect others. In some fields, it is even very good. It is provocative. Olaf's vocal language combined with his tall body, strong movements and resolute expression made Harry, Tom and others immersed in it. They trembled with excitement, and they wanted to rush out to fight the enemy immediately. "Olaf, we will always be your right-hand man. We must be able to conquer North America." After half a day, seeing everyone satiated with chicken soup, Olaf talked about a practical topic, which was about the management and development of the territory of the newly accepted New France, Chippewa and Abenaki. The population of North America is very sparse. The tribes on the south bank of the St. Lawrence River are relatively large but few in number. This is the reason for the high latitude. In this era, No country has close a population of 100 million. 80% of the American population is concentrated in Central America and South America, which are rich in products and have a warm climate. According to Olaf's previous understanding, there were only 1 or 2 million Indians in North America before the establishment of the 13 American colonies through actual contacts. Now, Olaf feels that even if there are differences, there will not be too many Indians on the North American continent. The native Indian population is small, and the North American continent is sparsely populated. With the muskets and loyal soldiers in hand, Olaf feels that it is not difficult to rule the 2 million square kilometers of land currently occupied, but how to develop is difficult. How to effectively integrate resources to develop colonies. Vinland's advantage is that it has many industries, while agriculture is relatively developed, but the disadvantage is that there is no one in his hands. Olaf thinks that if he has 100,000 whites in his hands, he can build a decent city-state within 5 years, creating dozens of times more. The output value. It's a pity that Vinland has only native Indians with language barriers, different cultures, and primitive living conditions. It is inherently difficult to change and train these people, even if they are trained to become skilled agricultural and industrial talents regardless of future risks. It's not a matter of 3 or 5 years regarding Vinland's governance and future development. Read www.canchu. In addition to Olaf, everyone in Com just said something irrelevant to Enher, because Tom and others did not have the idea of governing the country, and there was nothing useful in their minds. Olaf knew that if Heino would definitely be able to give some good suggestions, but now everything can only depend on himself. After thinking for a long time, Olaf can only use all the effective manpower that Vinland has left after deployment. Olaf planned to split the newly acquired territory. The original Chippewa territory was divided, half of which was allocated to the Huron district and half to New France. The territory near Labrador on the north bank of the St. Lawrence River in New France was assigned to the governor of the Basque city, Com, and became the first part of the Greater Labrador region. The territories of the Abnaki people and the eastern part of New France on the south bank of the river are integrated into the Abnaki district. After planning, Vinland has also added 2 new areas in the Abnaki district of New France, Huron and Labrador. Correspondingly become bigger. The establishment of the new area always requires a new governor and personnel to manage it. Olaf knows that the manpower is tight now, and he does not ask for too much. He only prepares to send the most trusted hand to carry out military management in today's situation. The rule can be maintained, and only the special products such as fur can be searched out after careful consideration. Olaf decided to send Salrak, Yaluki and Harry to manage the Abunaki district, with Salrak as the governor, the other 2 as deputy governors, and the hundreds of Vikings they brought back. Soldier Tom and Kalak had to take hundreds of Olaf's armed slaves to Quebec City as governor and deputy governor, responsible for the management of New France and the New France region formed by part of the Chippewa territory. Chapter 229, North American Storm, 5. After Olaf personally sent away Salrak and Tom and others at the dock, he returned to the Olaf factory and inspected the production conditions of the winery, sugar factory, porcelain factory, and other workshops. One by one the number of factory workers has now tripled compared to the original number. The original apprentices have become skilled workers, and many young indentured white slaves and indigenous slaves have also been selected into the factory to become apprentices. Although the daily expenses of the Olaf factory have also tripled, the corresponding returns have also increased substantially. Olaf saw mountains of wood, stone, bronze, and pottery in the warehouse, as well as hundreds of bone china vessels, most of which were white porcelain vases, plates, bowls, basins, etc. with simple patterns, and a few others. Fine porcelain, these are the most valuable things. Originally, these porcelains were several times larger, but they were taken away by Heine, who returned to Iceland some time ago accompanied by artisans. After playing with porcelain for a long time, Olaf reluctantly went to the warehouse where spirits and caramel were stored because Vinland owns a huge amount of potatoes and sweet potatoes. The winery and sugar factory can start work every day, and even expanded a certain scale this year. Therefore, Heine took away dozens of tons of wine and caramel when he left. It is said that it is enough for tens of thousands of people in Iceland, whether it is for personal use or for sale in Iceland. Although Heine emptied the warehouse when he left, many finished products were produced in more than a month. When Olaf entered the warehouse, he saw the distilled spirits in hundreds of clay pots and hundreds of sealed clay pots. The clay pot will be able to distill the wine in just 2 months. Opposite the earthenware jars are dozens of small one-size jars. The mouths of the jars are covered with linen cloth, and they are all filled with starch, mixed and chopped with caramel. Not bad. Wait until next spring, the warehouse will be full again. Olaf smiled, thinking of the piles of potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, pumpkins, turnips and other grains during the autumn harvest this year. He felt that the scale of the winery and sugar factory would be expanded next year. With the current population of Vinland and Iceland, the grain produced in Vinland, Huron and Iroquois can be eaten for 3 years this year. This is due to the reduction in production this year, otherwise I am afraid it will be 30% higher. Olaf said to himself, this year the Viking families are busy expanding their cellars to store their own grains. Together, our family's grain weighs 30 million pounds, which is more than 10,000 tons in terms of calculation units for later generations. Now, this is enough food for tens of thousands of people for a year. Leave 20% to make caramel and wine, and 20% to support slaves and others, and the rest will be shipped to Iceland next spring. This year, in addition to the great food harvest and the many good things about the huge increase in the territory, Olaf's thoughts about the cotton planted in the Iroquois plains were like a drunk, which gave him a blow in the spring of this year. Olaf personally led reliable white slaves and private slaves to plant nearly an acre of cotton, but only 80% of the cotton seeds sprouted in the summer. Large tracts of cotton grow well, but before long the flower buds fall off in a large area. In the end, less than half of the cotton blooms and sets fruit. Olaf estimates that 80% of the cotton is in North America's climate and China's climate. The Americas and South America are differently caused, but they are all insoluble at present. Although the output was not high, there was still some harvest after all. After harvesting, there was only less than 100 pounds of cotton, which disappointed Olaf. After the cotton was in hand, Olaf ordered the people to take out the cotton seeds hidden inside, and finally found that the number of cotton seeds was about the same as the ones planted in spring, and the quality was worse based on this year's experience. Olaf estimates that after planting these cotton seeds next spring, the next harvest will be even more bleak. Next time it's just a matter of harvest that Olaf can barely accept it, because next year he can still buy cotton seeds from Europe. But a problem he ignored before left him empty and unusable. Cotton becomes cotton cloth through several processes, such as cotton processing. It needs to be ginned to become fluffy and soft, then spun into threads, and then spun with cotton threads. Any process requires the use of corresponding tools and techniques. Olaf has not been engaged in the textile industry in his previous life and does not understand all the processes, so he has no way of dealing with the masses of cotton. After looking for many Viking women and Indian female slaves to study, these women who can make wool and wool also researched out the simplest way to deal with cotton, using a stone hammer and a wooden stick to smash a cotton ball, and then pull the cotton to change it. Supple and fluffy. Then a woman proficient in weaving spins the cotton needed into rope and thread in front of the weaving machine bought by Olaf, and then weaves the cloth. After working hard for half a month, I also wove more than 10 feet of cotton cloth, but after Olaf pulled it with a hand, he felt that the cotton cloth was not strong enough. Maybe it was not well woven, or the quality of cotton was not good. The use is different, but the soft touch still makes him very happy. In the end, under Olaf's guidance, the Viking women gave him 2 quilts and made 2 sets of underwear for him with cotton cloth, and there was nothing left after that. Olaf was not affected by the frustration of cotton planting. He made a planting plan for next year and planned to go to Europe in person next spring. In addition to sending food resources to Iceland, he should also focus on purchasing cotton seeds and putting away himself and even cotton cloth, textile technology and so on. At the same time, Tuokai's search for Chinese medicine in the East last year should also be followed up. Olaf returned to his home after the inspection. After drinking a glass of wine, he sat at the desk in his room, took out his own notebook, and opened the pages of the book with Burr's www.wuxiaspit.com. The quill pen was dipped in ink on it to supplement my new thoughts and plans. Olaf raised his head half a day later, then stretched out, revealing the paper filled with simplified Chinese characters and Arabic numerals on the book under him. Cotton planting and building the woodland textile industry were the top priority in 1632. The first thing is to buy the latest textile machines. It is best to buy Wangdaopo textile machines from Daming, which is said to be much more advanced than the current European textile machines. Equipment. The second is to go to the UK, not only to deepen friendship with the future protector of the country, but also to inquire about the attitudes and views of the UK and even other European countries towards Iceland through his relationship. The third is to find a way from Daming got a serious doctor. I have caught a cold these few days.
Although I drank some radix isadidis and also drink more hot water, what should I do if I get other diseases in the future? I will try my best to find out for myself and my family. Medical skills and reliable doctors. Olaf is actually only 14 years old this year, but there is not the slightest immature and childishness on his face. Instead, his eyes are calm and lightly worried, just like he is not a teenager but a middle-aged man who is bent over by life. Olaf himself feels that since his father and the others went to Iceland, they have served as the head of the Vinland region this year, and all sorts of things have been weighed on him. Olaf is actually very stressed, and has even increased recently. A problem with insomnia, but Olaf does not hate this feeling. He understands that the difficulties now are all about his own tempering and training. When Iceland stabilizes, his father will definitely send someone to Vinland to assist him in the future. Even his elder brother Olaf is very likely will come back. After all, King Wenland is not a seat that can be let out casually. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Piku and number 039, S Happy Life. When Olaf was struggling to manage the huge Wenland by himself, the governor of Greenland, Piku, more than 1,000 miles north of Wenland, was a great surprise because of the 3 ships of grain and wood sent by Wenland this year. Greenland's urgently needed resources, such as wares and bronzes, are in place when the Abenaki attacked the Chippewa territory. The autumn harvest on Vinland Island came to an end. This time of the year is the time to send supplies to Greenland. Considering that the total amount of food harvested this year is larger than before, it is entirely possible to increase support for Greenland. Without thinking about it, Olaf sent 3 armed merchant ships that were not equipped with artillery, loaded with fresh potatoes, sweet potatoes, and corn, turnips, pumpkins, as well as pickles, raisins, spirits, caramel, wood, bronzes, ironware and other items were sent to Nuuk, Greenland's only economic and political center and a large fixed population gathering place because of the bumper harvest this year. Olaf took 30% of the share of taxes collected from each family and gave it to Greenland to support Piku's colonization. This year's planting area is much larger than last year. Even if the production is reduced, the total amount is still higher than last year. As a result, the resources sent to Nuuk have increased, especially in the area of food, which has almost doubled in the past 2 years. Piku has found 2 or more Inuit girls as spouses for his more than 200 Inuit-born Vikings and 400 White Wolf soldiers. They have already found 2 or more Inuit girls as spouses before the winter of this year. With the addition of more than 500 children, Piku knows that these families are the foundation for him to take charge of Greenland, and it is also the foundation for his master Olaf to take charge of Greenland, so he has always given these families the best treatment. Piku himself married 7 women, all of whom were the daughters and even wives of chiefs from all over the world. They also gave birth to 4 children. This made Piku so satisfied that he became more and more satisfied with his harem members. It's generous. After the arrival of this year's supplies, Piku gave all the raisins with the least share to his woman as a reward. The area of Greenland is beyond the imagination of ordinary people, but most of the northern area is not suitable for human survival. Even the Inuit people have to live in a family unit of less than 10 people. Since last year, Piku has completely agreed to the entire island of Greenland. Even the Inuit living in the most remote corners have surrendered to Piku and presented bearskins, sealskins, whale horns, and walrus tusks. At the same time, I also got potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, turnips and other foods, a small amount of fresh, more dried fruit that has been processed. According to statistics, the total number of Inuit in Greenland is only over 20,000, and Piku has a wealth of food and supplies. After the trade called tribute and last food, the Inuit people on the whole island regularly hand over the wealthy fur and walrus tusks, narwhal horns, and even whale oil, skins, and bombs in exchange for sweet potatoes, turnips, pumpkins, potatoes and other foods. Because of their living environment, the Inuit people who love meat have also added many new foods to their recipes, especially the roasted sweet potatoes, baked potatoes and other delicacies they occasionally make after accumulating enough animal fat or wood. Delicious for all ages. After the impact of high-starch foods, Greenland's Inuit can no longer stop the desire and habit of dealing with King Piku. Strictly speaking, Piku is not only the leader of Greenland, but also the island's more than 20,000 Inuit. the only patron and client of Terran because of sufficient food, and the scale of reindeer farming has begun. Hundreds of reindeer are running on the land and on the hillsides of the islands around Nuuk. Even this summer, the reindeer farm manager Bell opened up in the north and south of Nuuk. 3 or 4 new grazing spots to be precise. The income from hunting is not counted now. Greenland is just breeding reindeer. There are 2,000 reindeer in terms of size. There are more than 100 muskoxen. The person in charge of the breeding plant, Bell, and others have also continued. Locally recruited Inuit as workers, responsible for more and more feces picking up, shearing saw angles, milking and slaughtering, and many other things. Every grazing site has also built strong and warm wooden houses for workers to live in. Greenland's harsh climate has led to sparse vegetation and thin moss turf, and the recovery is slow after animal gnawing. Therefore, although the island has a large area, there are not many large and small animal populations and its development is slow. However, after Nuuk's reindeer breeding factories, domestication and management of reindeer and professional breeding techniques, the reindeer population has grown in size. It can be said that the vegetation on every hillside where the reindeer herds has been treated has been severely destroyed. The above time can only recover. Fortunately, there are still few reindeer breeding sites, but there are many places where reindeer live, so there is no problem for the time being. But Bell is aware of this problem, so he plans to increase slaughter workers, regularly capture the old and weak reindeer for elimination, and control the growth of the reindeer population not too fast, so as not to damage the poor living environment of Greenland. In Olaf's plan, Greenland is positioned as a large-scale pasture that provides meat, fur, wool and other materials for Vinland. Therefore, Pikku is also focusing on the development of reindeer breeding and fishing, relying on the large boats made of wood transported by Vinland. Nuuk has formed more than a dozen fishing teams. Each team's daily harvest exceeds the previous harvest of 10 kayaks, which not only protects the north and south of Nuuk. There are 7 or 8 gathering spots in the surrounding areas for the living needs of more than 3,000 people, and they continue to make dried fish, which are piled up for shipment to Vinland. Through the development of Piccolo and Bell, Greenland has been generating revenue since last year. This year, it has added stable production of reindeer skins, reindeer meat, reindeer antlers, and other commodities on the basis of dried fish, and leather goods. Reindeer milk. Pikku has already made a bold statement in Nuuk, asking everyone in Nuuk to work hard. In the spring of next year, he will send 1,000 reindeer skins and dried reindeer meat from the farm to the owner of Olaf in southern Vinland. Reindeer antlers, reindeer cheese, etc. Greenland rule the rivers and streams in Nuuk. The core of Nuuk's ruling is the White Wolf Soldier and the Vikings. 2 years have passed since the Pikku and the White Wolf soldiers have been completely integrated. He was born as an Inuit. The head of the oars among the Vikings is also the highest. Therefore, Pikku is now more powerful and more experienced as a governor. There are huge and large number of sea ships and hard and sharp iron tools, as well as a powerful army. These have given him a reputation among the Inuit peoples across Greenland that no one can achieve in the entire race for thousands of years. Among the many tribal groups in the east, west, north and south of Greenland, although some people call Pikku the king, some see him as the incarnation of the gods, and some people fear him in awe, but the King Pikku, he has become the greatest man in Greenland, and he is also the first leader in Inuit history to unify the entire island. Pikku enjoys his current life very much. For him, he has been confused to the extent that he wants what he wants. Every morning when you open your eyes, you are surrounded by fat, thin beauties. You don't need to do it yourself from eating to dressing, and you can even lie down and enjoy all kinds of tricks on the bed. When they go out, everyone in the Inuit will kneel and bow when they see themselves. Even the White Wolf soldiers and Vikings respect and obey themselves. They can make a tribe disappear from the world by giving an order. Let a poor Inuit boy become the leader of the family. Pikku thinks that the paradise that the White Master said may be such a life. Because of happiness, Pikku felt more grateful to Olaf in his heart. He learned from the captain and sailor who delivered the goods that Master Heir had gone back to the Far East to do what the great Lord of Iceland had done, and the Master Olaf was a man. The Lord of Land, Pikku was very happy, chanting that he would personally go to Vinland next year to congratulate the host. After learning that Lord Heir and others led the Viking army to fight against the Danes in Iceland, Pikku was very nervous, and when he learned that he had won, he got up happily. www.uxiaspit.com and waited until the captain told Pikku. Master Olaf was worried that Iceland would have a war with Denmark next year, and even sent Hyanet to Mrs. Catlin and Miss Gurney to Iceland, and Piku became serious after the 3 large ships left Nuuk with the materials he harvested from hunting for half a year. Piku immediately summoned the 2 leaders of the White Wolf soldiers and the white men such as Bell, and made a decision that as a White Wolf soldier as the backbone, selected the Inuit youth from all over Greenland, formed an army, and gave it to the owner of Olaf next year. It can be regarded as the master of Greenland and the master of heir, who will make some contributions to the great cause of Iceland and Vinland. After all, as long as you fight a war, you always need soldiers. Piku's decision was unanimously agreed by everyone, because this year's food is more than last year, and the harvest of fishing, hunting, and breeding also has a large amount of meat, so Nuuk now has the resources to support a large team of personnel of the army, because after more than half a year of professional training by Hudik and Wenlin, the quality of the White Wolf soldiers has been very mature. The 2 White Wolf leaders, Piku, Noonan and Sarakino, think that a White Wolf guard can lead 5 an Inuit militia. After a simple plan, Piku decided to recruit 2,000 Inuit males to form an army of 2,400 men. In the hands of Piku, there is actually an Inuit militia with more than 1,000 people. This is a team he formed with his Viking males as the core and absorbed the Inuit who conquered the first year. It has not been less in the past 2 years. Make meritorious deeds. However, after the White Wolf soldiers left, Piku lost an arm. In order to ensure his dominance and deterrence, he could only hold the militia he trained firmly in his hands. Chapter 231, The Spring of 1632. In 1631, the center of the world in the eyes of the Orientals was Daming, where disasters continued. Earthquakes, famines, civil disturbances, and gangsters continued to weaken the Daming dynasty, which was slipping faster and faster on the downhill road. Haugen succeeded in creating the first A batch of artillery, named the General of God Bless Cheer. The center of the world in the eyes of Westerners is still the same as before. In the European war that lasted for more than 10 years, the protagonist of the Protestant League has changed from Christian IV of Denmark to Gustav I of Sweden. Gustav I deserves to be a genius military strategist. Under his wise command, Europe's first established regular army, formed and trained by his own citizens, was in the north of Germany, conquering the city and expanding its results. The emperors and generals of the Holy Roman Empire were very frightened. After dispatching several soldiers to increase their staff, they attacked Magdeburg, which fell to Sweden, and carried out revenge on the city in the name of purging and killing the Protestants. The massacre almost slaughtered more than 30,000 people in the city, and the front of the Holy Roman Empire was directed at the left ribs of Gustav I's army. Gustav I reacted quickly and joined forces with the princes of the northern city-states of the Protestant German faith. The army of nearly 50,000 people and the famous Shenloatili launched a decisive battle, defeated the Shenlo army in one fell swoop, and seized a large area of northern central Germany. The Europa continent in 1631 was destined to be the stage of His Majesty Gustav I. Successive victories made him a hero comparable to a 1,000-year-old emperor. The monarchs of European countries all maintained Gustav I Adolf with respect and fear. In the second half of 1631, the war was suspended. Representatives of Sweden, France, and Shinra were negotiating in Bavaria in southern Germany. However, the of the Holy Roman Empire, the Duke of Bavaria, apparently had no intention of real peace talks, and had been arguing with Sweden. Everyone knows that after the cold winter, maybe next spring will be the continuation of the war. Different from the tense atmosphere in Germany, Vinland and Iceland in the winter of 1631 have always been quiet and peaceful hideaways. People nestled in their own rooms with fireplaces, charcoal basins, and coal stoves. They slept and woke up to eat and were full. Sleeping life, only occasionally go out to do something. For the Vikings and Indian slaves living in Iceland, the cold winter and long nights make it impossible to go out. Even though the ports in Iceland are non-freezing ports, no one goes out to fish. The tradition of Iceland is to accumulate in the summer. Dried fish should be consumed in winter. Vinland's flatness is due to the sparse population and the strict hierarchical rule of Viking Raiden, which leads to strict classification and definition of labor and income, identities and responsibilities, so people always live in a fixed pattern. Cold winter Wenland was also unable to engage in production. Almost everyone stayed in the room with potatoes and sweet potatoes for more than a month. It wasn't until the Viking Thanksgiving Day in January 1632 that Wenland suddenly became lively. Viking Thanksgiving Day is a holiday created by Catlin, imitating the British who colonized North America. The difference is very big. First of all, The objects of gratitude are different. The British are grateful to the Indians, and the Vikings are grateful to the ancestors who discovered Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland hundreds of years ago. If there were no ancestors to Greenland, Vinland, etc., there would be no current Vinland and Greenland, so when the Thanksgiving Day came, everyone took out the wine and meat from the house for a carnival. The slaves of the Vikings also received the reward of the master, and the contracted white slaves also received the reward of Olaf. Thanksgiving in Wetland is not only a holiday for the Vikings, but also a holiday for everyone. Olaf has long been tired of Wetland's boring life, but it's better to have busy things to pass the time in other seasons. Staying at home in winter is very lonely and boring. Olaf also wants to be lively, so he is in Hadarsson. A banquet was held, and all the Vikings who stayed behind in the city of Grote were summoned to the castle to eat and drink for a day after Thanksgiving. The weather in Wetland gradually became warmer before the end of Thanksgiving, and the factory's resumption of work in production and spring hunting operations gradually began to be implemented when Olaf was busy. Iceland also ushered in the spring of 1632. In winter, Iceland was silent for more than a month. After the arrival of spring, it gradually recovered its former bustle, especially Duggan. Commercial activities began in late January. Only in early February did Icelandic merchant ships carry wool and sheepskins, cowhide, dried fish, etc. leave Hong Kong for sale. It was only this year that the Great Duke of Iceland, Heir, reissued the latest tax collection rules and regulations to tax the operations of the Vikings in Iceland, including agriculture, fisheries, grazing, and commerce. After a simple measurement, the people of Iceland know that the tax collected by the Icelandic parliament is 1/3 less than that collected by the governor's house in the past. This makes the Icelandic people who have been squeezed by no exploitation for hundreds of years grateful and tasted it for the first time. Being the master of the house, the Iceman treats the sweetness of the Ice Hater, also completely put on the title of benevolent Great Duke. Every Icelandic citizen paid taxes enthusiastically and carried out their own production and life with high morale. In addition to relocating people's livelihood in Daggan and the other 4 general districts, they are also busy organizing training for soldiers. Although training was stopped for more than a month because of the winter, the Viking soldiers still showed strong organizational and executive power. Most of the 5 Viking regiments were Icelanders. They were tall and strong, and they had a sea robbery. Folk customs. Many people have practiced fighting skills such as swordsmanship and flying spear and axe since childhood. www.uxiaspit.com. So after professional training, everyone is a unit with comprehensive combat capabilities. While the wealthy Icelandic businessmen in Daggan dispatched ships to go out for business and looting, Heir also sent 2 ships from the northeast peninsula back to Daggan on Heine's suggestion, preparing to take the supplies sent by Vinland to Amsterdam for sale. When the winter just entered last year, Heine, Katrin, Rolling and other family members returned to Iceland. The Viking executives were reunited for a winter. Although the national palace in the winter was a reception banquet for 3 or 5 days, Heir and Olaf Heine and others are not obsessed with it. They have been planning to break the Danish blockade after the spring, relying on nearly 40 large ships in their hands to go to Amsterdam to operate, sell some special products of Vinland and Iceland, and then purchase some wood, munitions, etc. Gandis, the manager of the East India Company, also met with Heir and obtained the monopoly of Icelandic specialties, which means that no matter now or in the future, Icelandic Vikings and foreign merchants can only trade with Gandis's East India. This is the feedback from Honrad's support and help to Heir years ago. At present, Denmark has launched diplomatic forces to stop Britain's commercial activities with Iceland, while Denmark controls the Baltic Sea's access to the sea. At the same time, it also restricts its merchants and ships from Sweden and Poland from going to Iceland, but Dutch businessmen are the boldest. Many of them are still quietly trading with Iceland. In the winter, Heir and others plan, Iceland will take the initiative to go to Amsterdam this spring for business activities, and at the same time, to prevent Icelandic ships from not being there. When the North Sea was attacked by the Danish Navy, Heir asked Gandis to contact Danish family members in an effort to discover the movements of the Danish Navy. Chapter 232, Unwilling Christian IV. Gandis is not well known in Copenhagen, because the Honrad family is very large, and Gandis is only a side branch in the countryside, and there is no rumor about his coming to Iceland on behalf of the family, so Gandis can completely rely on. At present, Gandis's identity in Iceland is just a Slavic businessman, and his deceptive purpose is to better serve Heir, send Danish information to Iceland, and implement a Traitors Act. Gandis quickly dispatched his own merchant ship to sea, and it took a week before he got the real information from Denmark, and then reported it like Hader. After Magnus and Christian returned from the defeat last year, both were punished. The mercenaries of King Christian IV and the royal guards who had not yet died in action paid a large amount of pensions, which made them have just returned from the European War. The Danish finances, which had been relieved in the failure of the United States, were beaten back to their original shape. The small Icelandic rebellion did not attract the attention of Christian IV, but the Danish army failed to conquer Iceland and was defeated. This made Christian IV extremely angry and felt a deep shame. The successive failures deeply stimulated the pride of the Nordic power Denmark. Christian IV believed that losing to the Holy Roman Empire alliance could be reluctant to accept, but losing to the little Iceland could not be tolerated. He pressured the parliament and asked for the reorganization of a powerful. The Danish navy and army wiped out the opposition forces in Iceland in one fell swoop and brought Iceland, which has been Denmark since ancient times, back into its control. After more than a dozen discussions and plans in the past 10 times, Denmark finally decided to borrow from the United Kingdom. It did not receive the money before because Christian IV only wanted to rely on family love and face. Now Denmark is willing to grant King Charles I of England to pay interest for the loan. Charlie, who was sloppy, would naturally not refuse. In February 1632, the 1.2 million shilling loan promised by Britain was carried back to Copenhagen by the Danish navy. Christian IV personally counted the coins, and then asked the newly promoted finance minister Fitz-Ulfie to pay the loan to the shipyard in Magnus. According to the previous plan, Copenhagen shipyard has Denmark's most advanced shipbuilding equipment and technology, as well as the most skilled workers. It is a shipyard comparable to Amsterdam. It has been making warships and merchant ships for the country for many years. This time Christian IV is preparing to conquer Iceland in a big way. Another order for 30 armed warships was placed as for Magnus. After all, King Dan's son-in-law, or a rare general in Denmark, Christian IV still relies on him. After thinking about it again and again, he still makes Magnus commit the crime and continue to be responsible for the recruitment and training of soldiers and the attack on Iceland. Gandis told Hader that according to King Christian IV's plan, the time for recruitment and training was only half a year. September was the time to attack Iceland. Before this time, the Danish navy was traveling in the North Sea. At the same time, a 10-ship navy stationed in the Faroe Islands to block Iceland. After expressing his gratitude to Gandis, Hader ordered the generals to convene a meeting of Viking Raiden to make a strategic plan for the Danish army's pressure in half a year. This time is different from the last time. Denmark is now prepared and has borrowed a loan from the United Kingdom. It can be said that it is preparing to conquer Iceland with a nationwide effort. For a small Iceland, it has reached a critical moment. Carelessness is a situation where the city will be destroyed and lost forever. Hader was under a lot of pressure and lacked confidence in his heart, so he could only rely on the 5 leading generals and Heine, hoping that they could come up with some strategies to win by cleverness and train their troops to prepare for battle. After entering March, General Lidang arrived in Dagen one after another. After holding several conferences, based on the opinions of Hudic and Heine, Hader formulated the Icelandic defense war, build a bastion at the Dagen wharf, and at the same time move the people of Dagen to the north and south. The wharf to the central and eastern areas will become battlefields of fortifications and traps. In the future, the focus of resisting the landing and offensive of the Danish army will be placed in the dock and the central area. The eastern area behind the National Palace serves as the last line of defense. As long as all the forces of Iceland are placed on the 3 lines of defense, to ensure that the 3 lines of defense are not lost, Reykjavik will not fall. As long as Reykjavik is not lost, the Free Republic of Iceland and Great Duke Hader will always exist. After all, the importance and status of Reykjavik in Iceland is irreplaceable. If the big port is lost, Hader will take people to other places. When the region went to fight against Denmark, the people's hearts were also lost. At the same time, without the support of Dagen, the Viking legion trapped on the island would not last long, and it would eventually end in annihilation. Beginning in late March, Hader convened the Parliament as the Grand Duke, announcing that the Free Republic of Iceland has entered a special period of military control. All regions are ruled by Viking thunder, and all external commerce, production and life activities of the people are suspended. All the Vikings agreed to reorganize and adopt a rationing system under the management of the generals and district chiefs, rudder heads, or heads, and production captains. While the people are living under the planned economic rationing system that Olaf said before, the 5 major players must pay close attention to the training of elite soldiers, conduct military training such as formation, raiding, musket shooting, flying spear and axe, and spear thrusting. The war is about to break out soon, and Iceland instantly opens the battle mode, and the entire island people have become a huge bastion, ready to make all kinds of preparations. The Viking leading system has been deeply rooted in Iceland for more than half a year. www.wooxiaspit.com. After becoming a Viking, life is indeed much better than before. His Royal Highness Hader loves the people like a son. A benevolent, great, and even a great military strategist. He defeated the powerful Danish invading army. In addition, there is also the distant Vinland land as a carrot that can be seen and touched. Do the Vikings of Iceland willingly accept it? The rationing system is based on Viking raids, distribution work and food rations. The purpose is to stick to this year and repel the Danish army that invaded Iceland. In the future, you can get Indian slaves and fertile land for Vinland. Live a prosperous and happy Viking. Master the illusion of Wangmaya quenches thirst. Icelanders don't know, and Hader doesn't know, but he understands the principle of drawing cakes to satisfy their hunger, and as long as the Danes can be defeated again, Denmark's national power will decline again. Within 3 to 5 years, it will absolutely be unable to deal with Iceland and win development in time. Iceland will be able to integrate with Vinland, exploding with great potential, and in the future will be able to have a truly independent status and powerful strength, and become a country that can communicate and cooperate with other countries on an equal footing in order to allow the Icelandic people to sacrifice temporarily and contribute to the collective. Hader did not hesitate last time and promised again to wait until this year's victory over Denmark to reward the Icelandic people with more land and slaves in Vinland. For example, regardless of other credits, as long as they are Icelandic Vikings, they can get the basic reward of an indigenous slave. After learning of the new reward order issued by His Highness the Benevolent Great Lord, I have never felt the Lord's tolerance and love, and the Icelanders who have been exploited and squeezed are moved once again for their own happy life, but also for the benevolent monarch. The Viking people of Iceland are more motivated to work, and their enthusiasm is even higher. Chapter 233, Industry is booming. The spring in Vinland is warmer than in Iceland. Olaf has felt this way since he came to Vinland. According to the elderly Bedak slaves, Vinland decades ago was much warmer than it is now. Many times in winter, it doesn't even snow or freeze. Olaf is skeptical of this statement, but he is not completely disbelief. Now the entire Earth is in the Little Ice Age, and Vinland, Iceland, and Greenland are indeed significantly colder than before. The hunting of beavers and other animals for years has led to the almost extinction of animals on Vinland Island. This year, hunters in the cities of Herod and Hader worked hard to make traps and place traps. As a result, they only caught more than 100 in a week. Only beavers, and white wolves killed more than 40 heads. Olaf knows that excessive killing has collapsed Vinland's ecosystem. The beasts that were everywhere are now very rare. In order to ensure that Vinland's for production does not drop this year, Olaf can only send people to Rab, Leto, Quebec, Abuniki, Huron, Iroquois, Plymouth and other regions. Require the governors of all regions to seize the time to increase hunting and use glass and glass products, porcelain, ironware, etc., which the Native Americans like. Attract the natives in their respective regions to exchange the fur in their hands. When the war and spring hunting operations were in full swing all over Vinland, the Olaf factory was also working overtime to produce all kinds of goods. Olaf went back and forth between the factory workshop and the breeding plant every day, paying attention to the industrial development of Groot City, and at the same time sending people go to Hader City to learn about the shipyard's progress in building ships. After a few days, the weather became warmer and warmer. After a spring rain, Tom suddenly returned to the city of Groot and told Olaf some good news. The jurisdiction of New France extends from the banks of the St. Lawrence River to a large area of land centered on Quebec. The easternmost point is the northern part of the Nova Scotia Peninsula and Cape Breton Island. The Nova Scotia Peninsula has been a Scottish colony in recent years. The company tried to colonize the location, but because of the rise of Vinland and the demise of the Massachusetts Bay Company, the Scottish company dispelled the idea of colonization. In recent years, it has been a place where pirates are entrenched. However, because of Vinland's great momentum in recent years, and Hudik and Olaf's efforts to wipe out pirates and fishing boats in the past 2 years, this has led to fewer pirates in the eastern part of the Nova Scotia Peninsula, and basically all moved to the south. The Bahamas is stationed. After Tom became the governor of New France, the first thing he did was to lead troops to patrol all the residential areas in the territory, and met with the Huron, Cree, and Abenaki people in each residential area. He finally arrived. It was the Nova Scotia Peninsula,
and then it was discovered that there was an open-pit coal mine in the northern part of the peninsula. Tom, who knew Olaf made briquettes and experienced the benefits of briquettes, immediately returned 70% of the briquettes and told Olaf the good news. Olaf remembered that he had also remembered that there was indeed a large coal mine on the Nova Scotia peninsula, and it was an open-pit mine. Vinland's coal mining is not easy, production has been difficult to increase, and transportation is difficult, much worse than the coal mines in the northern part of the Nova Scotia peninsula. Without thinking about it, Olaf sent someone to the Changlingshan coal mine to inform manager Robert that he should go to the Nova Scotia peninsula and move the coal mine to the Nova Scotia peninsula. If possible, the shipyard in Hader City is mainly based on clinker brought back from Amsterdam. It is matched with the mature wood produced by the Vikings over the years. Since the summer, it has been in the clockwork to build ships under the leadership of Mr. Hubbard, with an average of 1-2 ships can be built every month. Up to now, 12 sturdy ships have been produced for Olaf. This type of ship is Sweden's latest warship. It has a long and narrow body and is divided into 3 layers. A total of 4 different types of ships can be hung on the front and rear. This sail is fast at sea, with up to 24 artillery mounted on one side, making it the best choice for naval battles. Olaf went to see it in person, and found that Hubbard's ship was much better than the ones that his father and uncle took to Iceland. He couldn't help but sigh that he was lucky to pick Hubbard to join. Hubbard proved his excellent technology and superb shipbuilding skills with facts. Olaf also increased his wages by 3 times after the shipyard resumed work in the next year, and also gave him 2 female slaves and 2 male slaves. Hubbard sent an apprentice specially to express his gratitude to Olaf. At the same time, he said that the spare parts he brought from Amsterdam last year have been used up. At present, they are made of copper rivets and can only be used barely. Therefore, I beg Olaf this year, purchase more parts and equipment needed by the shipyard. After the letter is a few lists, which are full of specifications, quantities, and even prices of the parts and equipment needed. Olaf was very satisfied with the list, and then he was attracted all his attention and energy by the annual harvest of special products. Maple syrup is a unique specialty of Wendland region and the first hit product invented by Olaf. Harvesting starts at the end of February every year, and all must be collected before the end of March. After that, the sap is boiled into syrup, and finally loaded into the crock. The golden royal jelly can be shipped to Europe in exchange for a large amount of gold and silver. Vinland's products are mainly leather goods such as skins, maple syrup, sugar, spirits, dried fish, etc., supplemented by starch, wine, raisins, dried meat, porcelain, copper, wood, etc. The overall value is extremely high, and it is getting higher and higher, but leather goods and sugar currently occupy the highest share of income. Sugar naturally includes maple syrup and caramel. The malt sugar consumes a lot of potatoes and sweet potatoes, and the daily output is not high. The cost is 4 or 5 times more than food. www.uxiaspit.com. But maple syrup is made from the juice of wild maple trees, and it only lasts a year. It can be collected once. It can be said that only a few manpower and firewood briquettes can be boiled to get a year-round harvest. The cost is very low and the return is great. In addition to the current European sugar products, Spain's granulated sugar and Vinland's caramel have each accounted for half of the market, and the high-end market is occupied by Vinland's royal jelly and oriental white sugar. Olaf attaches great importance to the maple syrup industry. In any industry, he is worried that the limited time will affect the output in next year's output. He can only devote himself to the work of extracting maple juice, and constantly urges the governors and workers to attach great importance to it, and at the same time, according to the previous output, the numbering made by the big maple tree of high-quality maple syrup sent people to give priority to the juice while the 9th district of Wendland was busy hunting for fur. The work of extracting juice from maple trees became increasingly clear and important. Vikings, white slaves, and indigenous slaves, who have been completely busy since the beginning of the spring, have worked tirelessly at the request of Olaf and contributed to the increase in output and income of Vinland's specialty products. The busiest time for Wendland is usually in spring, because it concentrates on hunting in spring, picking maple sap, making sugar, and spring plowing sowing. It can be said that every spring, including the Viking master, is busy for nearly 3 months. Time flew away bit by bit, and when Olaf looked up from the tedious affairs, he realized that 2 months had passed in a blink of an eye. After repeatedly confirming to Spear, the old housekeeper who was serving at home, Olaf accepted the fact that it is now the end of March and it is about to enter April. After all, the temperature on the island has begun to warm up,
and even flowering and long leaves have gradually become common. The late spring of Vinland is about to pass. Chapter 234, North American Native Slave Core. Iceland Rise novel. Find the latest chapter. Olaf finished his 3-in-1 breakfast of toast, fried venison and oatmeal made by the slave girl at home, then put on a light cotton robe and walked out of the room in a leather jacket. These 2 days are the days when Labrador, Iroquois and other 6 districts outside of Vinland Island delivered maple syrup, fur, wood, dried meat and other goods to Heir City. Olaf calculated that there should be this morning too. It's here, so I have to go to the dock early and check the items in order to order the merchandise as quickly and accurately as possible. Olaf sent someone to the school early in the morning to take the 2 old priests Dracula and Dukeo, as well as dozens of students from Vikings and white slaves according to Olaf's teaching requirements for Vinland School. These students first learn the mathematics that Olaf believes is currently the most practical in Vinland. Olaf attaches great importance to mathematics talents, so the mathematics textbooks of the 2 old priests were written by Olaf himself, because the teaching activities have been going on for more than a year. Even if the Viking children and the white slave children are not very smart, more than half of the students can complete the task of adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing, which is used to count the goods and commodities. During the 1 year that Olaf managed Vinland, he has had a lot of inexplicable feelings, especially his understanding of the many shortcomings of leading Vinland. Vinland's population was small and there were many illiterate people. Most of the staff were even native Indians who were not good at Old Norse. Although it was not difficult to manage, the execution and response power of these slaves was very poor, even better than that of white slaves. It is much worse. The deployment, execution and even communication of many things will take a lot of time, and the effect will also be discounted. Olaf knew that the reason for this result was that most of Vinland's people were ignorant and simple-minded indigenous slaves. However, Olaf did not intend to provide advanced cultural education to the Native Americans for the time being, but only intended to popularize Gunnar among them. Because he was worried that the native slaves would be too smart to make trouble. After all, Olaf and the Icelanders want to rule Vinland and even North America in a stable way. They can only develop fools and let the native Indians, who have far more than Icelanders, be a fool. Olaf is now more and more able to understand the mentality of the emperors of the Great Khan, living Buddha in the Qing dynasty. The majority of the population is really like sitting on pins and needles, like living in a volcanic crater. He doesn't dare to give the ruled aliens a little bit of power to rise. Opportunity to wake up. After a year and a half of teaching, the church school in Heir City has trained dozens of teenagers and children from Viking and white slave families according to Reverend Dracula's expectation. The students with the best classwork will be able to graduate as long as they wait for a while. Olaf, who is named the principal, will arrange a good job for this group of students, either as an accountant or as a clerk. In short, they will assist the governor and other important officials to carry out their work. Olaf firmly believes that as long as the church school in Growth City can continuously cultivate talents, Vinland will be full of talents in the future, and there will be no more embarrassment for Vinland's government affairs for a year. 2 days later, the 6 major districts outside Vinland Island, Bakken City and Heir City on the island, all escorted the materials to Heir City, and put them in the warehouse. After the inventory was made, Olaf flipped through the regular ledger. It was written by the students under the guidance of the 2 old priests. There were product names, specifications, quantities, and origin. They were basically clear at a glance, which was very convenient. Olaf doesn't need to do his own calculations. Just take a simple look and you will know that the leather goods, maple syrup and other materials escorted from various places this year are less than last year. Especially the less leather goods are more obvious. Among them, the most serious ones are Vinland Island and Rab. Leto Peninsula. This is because the harvest last year was too serious. Olaf thought that as long as Iceland can establish the status of an independent country in Europa in the past 2 years, Vinland's hunting of beavers and other animals will slow down in the future, giving wild animals a period of time to thrive, so as not to kill chickens and get eggs, and no way out. A mercy of the kind Olaf in his mind for animals is only because he is afraid that he will not be killed if he is extinct. After years of experience and training in Vinland, his heart was exhausted because of the compassion accumulated in the civilized society of the previous life. Materials from various places have arrived, and the goods in the factory are piled up like a mountain. Olaf feels that it is time to take the goods to Europe. Just as Olaf was about to order people to overhaul the fleet and prepare for the trip, a large ship from Iceland brought some woolen products and linen, as well as news from heir after learning from the population of heir's soldiers and the Viking captain who came with the ship, that Denmark was preparing for the nation's efforts, forming a large army, expanding the navy, and possibly attacking Iceland again. So Olaf fell into contemplation. Last year's failure may not have caused Denmark to suffer heavy losses, nor did it allow the Danes to learn their lessons. On the contrary, it spurred a greater counterattack in Denmark. Although Olaf was worried before, he still had some problems when it happened. Be surprised it is the beginning of the 17th century. The population of Europe is more than 100 million. Among them, more than 20 million people include the Holy Roman Empire composed of Austria, Hungary and the Electorate, and the two continental powers of France. That is, the United Kingdom of Spain and Portugal, the Ottoman Empire, the United Kingdom of Poland, the United Kingdom of Lithuania, and the Russian Tsarist state, followed by the United Kingdom, which can barely approach the tens of millions. Except for these populous countries, the population of other countries is only 1 or 2 million. Denmark is currently a large Nordic country that has annexed Norway. Like Sweden, it has annexed Finland. It has a population of 2 million and its military strength is relatively high. Strong due to the reforms of Gustav II. Sweden has sharp artillery and strong army combat effectiveness. This has been confirmed in its dealings with countries such as Poland and Germany. In order to deal with Denmark, the Swedish navy is also rapidly growing. Coupled with a vast territory, Sweden has actually surpassed Denmark and has become the #1 power in Northern Europe that can blast both Russia and Poland on the ground. Although Denmark failed miserably in the battle on behalf of the Protestant Union, its naval strength was not significantly affected. At present, maintaining the status of the northern power depends on a powerful navy of 60 warships. Although Denmark's population of 2 million does not seem to be much, it is definitely a behemoth for Iceland, which has only 60,000, and Wendland, which has 200,000. Moreover, this behemoth has a powerful navy. If Iceland faced Denmark, which was attacked by the entire army, Olaf would not be confident about whether it would survive, and victory would be a small probability event. However, when Denmark faces the powerful Sweden around it, it should preserve its strength and should not spend too much money and force to attack in Iceland with little benefit. Olaf felt that Christian IV chose to attack Iceland with all his strength, and it may not be. If you really value Iceland, it is likely that Zhang Xian is weak, showing his muscles in front of European countries. Iceland is the chicken that Christian IV killed the chickens. Olaf felt that no matter what the Danish side was thinking about, he would definitely not let Iceland fall into defeat. He must allow the Free Republic of Iceland to survive and allow his father's great power to sit down safely. Olaf felt that by realizing all the Vinland resources he prepared this year, replacing them with weapons, equipment and supplies and sending them to Iceland, he would definitely improve Iceland's chances of winning. At the same time, he would also increase the progress of the Heir City shipyard and strive to build more battles. The ship supports Iceland, and Wendland's militias also need to expand their recruitment training. They must master an army with a certain combat capability and support Iceland at the right time. In an instant, Olaf flashed dozens of thoughts in his mind, and in the end he was determined to expand his army at any cost. After the Icelandic ship was loaded with potatoes, sweet potatoes and other food to leave, Olaf summoned the governor of the 9 districts to the city of Heir to attend the meeting. After waiting for 2 days, everyone was there. Olaf first notified the Icelandic ship the situation in Denmark's plan to attack Iceland for the second time, and then issued instructions in the voices of the fighting, demanding that each governor should quantify the number of warriors in accordance with the population of each district, including Iroquois, Huron, New France, the 7 regions of Abenaki, Labrador, Bacan City, and Plymouth have a larger population. www.wuxiaspit.com. Each region has to select more than 1,000 healthy young indigenous warriors, and the remaining regions also samurai ranging from 100 to 300 were sent. When the personnel are selected, they will be sent to the city of Herut. And Olaf will be personally responsible for the reorganization of the army. Olaf wants to use both the flintlock and matchlock in the warehouse to form a North American native slave corps with private slaves and existing militias as the backbone. This is the best thing he can do so far. Olaf felt that although the time was short and the organization and discipline of the Indian slaves was not good, perhaps the combat effectiveness of the legion would be very low, but as long as their 8 or 9,000 people can shoot arrows and guns, it will be a huge fire suppression, and close combat can set them free. Play, no matter how bad it is better than nothing. After all, the melee ability of Indian warriors with sharp iron weapons is not weak for the current Free Republic of Iceland, Every additional point of power increases the possibility of Iceland's victory or repulsion of Denmark. In order to facilitate the next reading, you can click on the favorites below to record this. Chapter 234 North American Native Slave Army, reading record, and you can see it next time you open the bookshelf. If you like the Rise of Iceland, please recommend this book to your friends, QQ, blog, Wetchet, etc. Thank you for your support. Chapter 235, Greenland Regiment. Iceland Rising New. Find the latest chapter. For more than a year when Olaf was supervising the country, Wenland treated the governors and city owners in an amiable manner, but this time the meeting was uncharacteristic. Not only did he strictly give the governors a fixed time limit, but also stipulated a reward and punishment mechanism. After the meeting, the 9 governors bid Olaf farewell and hurriedly left the city of Grote. Ready to return to the station to recruit militias, Olaf summoned the Viking women workers and the families of the white slaves and asked them to make militia uniforms and military boots from animal skins with the help of tailors at the Olaf factory Herat city. And even Wenland 9th district became busy again in early April, but they were busy with spring plowing before, and now they are busy forming a slave army. Olaf asked local governors to recruit militias. He himself was responsible for formulating training plans and preparing all material reserves. At the same time, he also asked the shipyard in Heir City to speed up the progress and overhaul the ships that had been built on April 8. After nearly a week of busy work, Olaf finally sorted out the relationship between big and small things, and at the same time ranked Dukeo and Dracula's 2 priests and a dozen of the best students in charge of supervision and management. With helper Olaf, he gave a sigh of relief, then returned to the castle, and ordered the cook to cook a large pot of lamb and prepare a good meal. As a result, the steaming lamb was just on the table, and Olaf didn't wait for a bite. Pushed away by the housekeeper Spear, the old butler who has been following Hader in Iceland, is the only survivor of the servants who followed Hagrid to colonize Vinland more than 10 years ago. However, Spear's body is not very good. In the coldest winters of the past few years, he has always suffered from asthma. After all, he is already 67 years old. Master. Cough cough. Piku from Greenland is here. He also brought more than 2,000 indigenous soldiers. He said he was worried about the lack of troops in Iceland. Hell, I'm here to send you the Greenland army. Spear coughed and spoke quickly, blushing. After 3 sentences, Olaf hurriedly got up and said, Spear, don't worry. Go and bring Piku. The Greenland legion he brought will be settled here first. Spear took a few breaths slowly, and then said, okay. I'm going now. After speaking, Spear bowed his waist and disappeared. Olaf sat down again, very happy, gnawing on the leg bones while controlling his emotions. Piku is Olaf's servant and friend. In the past few years, he has been far away and has less contact, but the feelings in his heart seem to have deepened a lot. Olaf has been living in Vinland for a year and now he knows that Piku came over, actually very happy. After a while, the sound of footsteps got closer and closer, and when the door was pushed open, Piku, wearing a snow-white polar bear leather jacket, walked in. Piku now has a big beard and sharp eyes. He stepped forward when he saw Olaf, knelt down and said loudly, Piku, see master. Is your body okay? I'm in Greenland. I'll look forward to seeing you day and night, and I finally got my wish today. Piku's words were sonorous and powerful, and at the end of his speech, his tone was low, and he even shed tears. Olaf's eyes were red, and he stepped forward to pull up Piccolo. I'm fine. How are you? I heard that you have married 2 more wives. How many children have you had? Olaf asked with a smile. Piku got up and wiped his tears, and grinned. It's all thanks to the blessing of the master. I am now 7 women, 4 children, and 2 in my stomach. I will wait until the children are a few years old. Send them to you to serve you. Olaf sat down with a smile, pointed at the lamb in a copper pot in front of him and asked, have you eaten it? Try potato stew with lamb. Neither Icelanders nor Inuit people have the habit of being polite. Piku rubbed his hands and sat down, grabbed a leg of lamb and gnawed it. Olaf gave a chuckle and picked 2 potatoes with a fork and placed them on the plate, pushed in front of Piku. Eat more. How does it taste? It's delicious. Piku grinned. You can eat good things with the owner. Those women in my family are not cooking ingredients. The taste is far worse than this. When I return to Greenland next time, master, you can give me some spices. Master Catlin's seal meat cooked in spices before is delicious. Food is always an eternal topic among human beings, because the desire to eat is very important. Olaf and Piku were eating lamb and talking, and the relationship seemed to have gone back to a few years ago. This relaxed and happy feeling Olaf and Piku both enjoyed. 10 minutes later, Olaf and Pico ate a whole pot of lamb before they ordered them to remove the tableware and replace them with porcelain tea sets. A skilled Indian slave boiled water on a coal stove to make tea for them. There are not many Heidelberg tea leaves. The only few pounds are luxury items bought from Europe. Last year tea is indeed a luxury in Europe at present. Only nobles and wealthy merchants can buy and drink it. However, because of different dietary habits, European nobles are still used to adding some sugar to neutralize the bitterness of tea. Olaf has to drink tea casually. Sometimes it is brewed and tasted according to the traditional Oriental method, and sometimes it is made into milk tea with sugar and milk. This time, Pico drank the brewed tea. Olaf frowned when Pico took a sip and smiled. "You don't like it? Ellie, you go get some milk and syrup. Pico, make a cup of milk tea." The indigenous female slave named Ailey has whiter skin and delicate features. She bowed and walked back after a while holding 2 cans of milk and syrup. After mixing it with the brewed tea several times, she mixed a cup with it. The milky and tea-scented white liquid was placed in front of Pico. Pico swallowed, then picked it up and took a sip. The sweet and mellow taste made him laugh. "Master, your milk tea tastes so good. I drank it better than wine," Pico said with a smile after drinking more than half a cup in one breath. Olaf chuckled and said, "Milk tea is very easy to make. Let Ellie teach you later and bring some tea when you leave. You can make it yourself when you go back." "Thank you, Master." "Pico, why did you think of bringing troops to support? What's the matter?" Olaf raised an eyebrow and asked. Pico said that he was worried that Hader would be struggling to defend Iceland, and then he also showed that he now has more than 20,000 Inuit people in his hand, and he should draw some people out to form a legion to support Vinland and Vinland as a new force. Iceland. Olaf was satisfied with Pico's loyalty, and asked, "How many people did you bring? How was the combat effectiveness?" "I left the leader of Sarakino to watch the house, and brought 2,400 elite soldiers. I named this army Greenland, which means that we are your Greenland slaves. The backbone officers in this army are all taken by me to Greenland. Of the more than 300 White Wolf soldiers, 70 or 80 of them have died of illness in the past few years, and the rest are elite www.uxiaspit.com. More than 2,000 Inuit warriors are also healthy and smart, which I have carefully selected from all over the world. The young people they are good hunters in their respective family tribes. Chief Noonan has also trained them for more than a week, and now it can be said that they have good combat effectiveness." Olaf nodded when he heard this. He has not given Greenland a large number of muskets. Therefore, this Greenland army is still a traditional army that uses spears and bows. Even because the quality and combat literacy of soldiers are different from Europe, this so-called Greenland army has combat effectiveness very low, but since the army is full of young people, after a period of professional training, it will improve a lot. Olaf is currently forming Wendland's slave army. He is very happy with Pico's joining of troops, and is also happy to have more than 2,000 troops in his hands. Olaf believes that as long as the Greenland Legion is given strict regimental training and management, and another 2 months of training with musket shooting, it is enough to apply it to the battlefield. After all, these Inuit are as brave as the Indian warriors of North America. Samurai, the current shortcomings are only organizational discipline and mastery of firearms. As long as they can make up for the shortcomings, they are definitely a strong army. In order to facilitate the next reading, you can click on the favorites below to record this, Chapter 235 Greenland Legion, reading record, and you can see it next time you open the bookshelf. If you like the Rise of Iceland, please recommend this book to your friends, QQ, blog, Watchit, etc. Thank you for your support. Chapter 236, Vinland's 6th Army. On April 8, 1632, Pico returned to Greenland with dozens of products including sealskins, walrus tusks, whale oil, whale skins, whale horns, polar bear skins, musk hides, reindeer skins, and dried fish from Greenland. Vinland is the governor of Greenland. Pico personally presented to Olaf a mountain of goods, as well as dozens of barrels of cheese, all made from reindeer milk yogurt, which is currently the only food in Greenland. Olaf knew that these items were of great value, and he was very pleased to award Pico as the supreme leader of Wendland as the prime Night Lord, and also rewarded him with a set of bone china vases and tea sets. Originally, Olaf planned to let Pico stay in Greenland for a few days. After all, the place had just been unified and there was no general garrisoned by his most trusted general. Olaf was worried about troubles or delays in this year's income, but after Pico learned that Olaf was going to Europe himself after forming a large army, he declared on the spot that he would follow his master, because this year Denmark will also attack Iceland. The master must form the Vinland Slave Corps to support the war between Iceland and Denmark. It is impossible for Piku to leave his master at this critical moment. Olaf sought Piku's affection and agreed to his request sincerely. Since April, Olaf has been following a bearded, yellow-skinned man with small eyes. He not only waits close to protect Olaf, but also protects Olaf. Hadarsson stayed and snatched the work of serving Olaf, such as washing the feet from the slave girl. At first, Piku had been served by people in Greenland and became a little rusty when he was serving Olaf, but within 2 days he returned to his previous level. Olaf's loneliness almost disappeared after Piku returned to him, and now he has a much better appetite, and he has to drink 2 glasses of spirits with Piku every day. This year Olaf is just 15 years old, and his physical development is almost over. However, Olaf has no obvious feelings about the physical needs of the opposite sex. In addition, although the native female slaves around him look good, they are always the only ones when they see themselves. No strange emotions. Olaf's loneliness is precisely a psychological problem. He can't find a close person, and even after Hannah leaves, he doesn't even have a friend who can talk. Therefore, his mood is getting worse and worse, and his loneliness is getting worse. Although Piku has no knowledge and culture, he has lived with Olaf for several years and has many common topics in life. His company can still relieve most of Olaf's feeling of loneliness. Piku is the person Olaf trusts most besides his relatives. Together with his loyalty, it is easy for Olaf and Piku to be together. Olaf and Piku review the soldiers of the Greenland Legion. Olaf admired the spirit of more than 2,000 Inuit fighters and 400 White Wolf officers, and then selected the guards of Heir City. Several captains, let them and the White Wolf soldiers conduct professional training for the Greenland army in accordance with a training manual prepared by Hudik. Olaf's mind is very clear and sharp recently. After setting up the training of the Greenland army in detail, he suddenly remembered that after the establishment of the Vinland Slave Army and the Greenland Army, there will be more than 10,000 people. These population records must be unavoidable to appear together. Infectious diseases and the cultivation of human pox have not been promoted in Abernethy, New France, and Plymouth, nor in Greenland. These are hidden dangers, so Olaf ordered the Viking women to use smallpox virus powder to vaccinate the soldiers of the Greenland Legion, and after the arrival of the slave legions in various places, they would also screen the indigenous soldiers who had not been sick or vaccinated to plant human pox. In April, Wendland has stopped most of its production and life, except that the factory has been busy. Contracted white slaves and indigenous slaves are responsible for weeding and catching insects in the fields, cutting timber, fishing and hunting. The Viking families, most people are cooking salt and sun-dried fish by the middle of the month. The indigenous slave army selected and organized by the governor of Wendland 9th district had arrived in Heir City under the personal leadership of the governor. The city of Heir, which had been deserted for a year, suddenly increased by more than 12,000 people, and it instantly became lively. Olaf ordered the soldiers to be settled down first. Fortunately, there were enough houses built in the city of Heir, so nearly 10,000 Native American soldiers and more than 2,000 Inuit soldiers from Vinland 9th district arrived in Heir City to live in a warm house. Although the governors of the districts prepared a large amount of dry food, Olaf ordered the Viking Raid's official warehouse to store food to support the food and drink of the various slaves and soldiers of more than 12,000 people. After personally inspecting the slave soldiers brought by each district, Olaf was basically satisfied, and then immediately called a deployment meeting attended by the governor of the 9 districts and the governor of Greenland. At the meeting, Olaf proposed to disrupt the order of the native Indian slaves sent from the selection of the 9th district of Vinland, plan and establish a system, and form an army. Olaf knew that the indigenous Indians on the mainland were not settlers. They belonged to the fishing and hunting people, with strong folk customs and advocating freedom. So although Wendland currently maintains temporary rule by destroying the original chief leaders and promoting the new leaders, most of them the native Indians did not really surrender. Therefore, the issue of loyalty to the army formed by the indigenous Indians is open to question. In order to ensure that he can firmly grasp the newly formed indigenous slave army, Olaf can only use the hatred and contradictions of the indigenous Indian tribes to divide them. According to Olaf's thinking, he wanted to transform the nearly 10,000 Indian slave warriors sent from the 9th district of Vinland into 5 slave legions, roughly a legion of about 2,000 people, and the composition of each Vinland slave legion was the embodiment. Balance the culture at present. Among the nearly 10,000 indigenous slaves, the Iroquois, Hurons, and Abnaki are the most numerous, the Crees and Pecks are less, and the Beoduc are the least. Except for the Beoducs, because they lived on Vinland for a long time, they did not have too many conflicts and struggles with other ethnic groups. There are more or less conflicts and hatreds among the remaining ethnic groups, especially the Iroquois and Hurons. People, Carrie, Abenaki, and Iroquois, have more than 100 years of blood in order to better control these uncivilized savages. www.wooksiaspit.com let them become sharp knives in his hand, so that the Iroquois, the Hurons, and the Abenaki people with the largest number of people form 3A Corps, but the middle-level and high-ranking officers of the Corps are their own private slaves, Bedak, and there are separate contract white slaves. The other two legions also have a small number of tribes. The remaining are the Crees and the Peckers. These two legions are composed of the Crees and Peckers. They are fully middle level, and a few are high level. Olaf believes that the 5 legions, if you set up according to your own method of mixing sand, there will be a relationship of competition and awareness, and you can fully control it. Although the coordination of the 5 corps may go wrong during the battle, Olaf now dare not ask for too much. He only wants to be able to command normally and let the 5 slave corps explode to a certain degree of combat effectiveness. In addition to the 5 Vinland slave corps, there is also the Greenland Legion, which is vaguely above them. These 6 legions are collectively referred to as the Vinland Sixth Corps. They are the only and most powerful force in Olaf's hands. After the discussion at the meeting, all matters were resolved, especially the leadership issue. The commander of the Vinland Sixth Army was held by Olaf himself, and the deputy commander was taken by Piku. At the same time, Piku was also the commander of the Greenland Legion, and Noonan was the deputy commander. The commanders of the remaining 5 slave regiments were Tom, Salrak, Yaluki, Polly, and Bjorn. After Olaf led the army to leave Vinland, Vinland was temporarily occupied by Kalm and Hilter. Responsible, Olaf does not have any requirements for them. He just wants to stabilize the overall situation in the summer and autumn of this year. It is good to grasp the agricultural planting in the Iroquois Plain in Vinland. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237, Vinland's Batteru. After 2 days of meeting and discussion, Olaf made some personnel adjustments, and then 6 Vinland regiments with an average of 2,000 men were established in the city of Growth. This is Olaf's only and most powerful weapon at present, and it is Olaf's plan to take Europe to support Iceland's new forces. Although this new army has problems like this, and even the simple instructions are not in place, Olaf knows that the simple and stupid Native Americans are the most suitable soldiers. After a period of training, I believe that they will have the future to become a soldier. The hope of the headman, the chief and even the Viking master, the 6 legions will be the sharp knives in Olaf's hands. After the legion was sorted out, Olaf ordered the people to take out the only 3,000 arquebuses and ammunition in the warehouse that had been eliminated, and asked the 6 legion leaders to select the most loyal, reliable, flexible, and sharp soldiers. Each legion has 500 people, and temporarily trained 3,000 musketeers. Vinland's most advanced flintlocks were taken to Iceland. Now Olaf only has matchlocks in his hands, barely enough to support the training of 6 corps musketeers. Olaf plans to have 6 corps in addition to training musketeers. The pikemen and a small number of cavalry. Olaf has everything in the spear warehouse, and Olaf is not worried, but there are less than 50 horses in Vinland and the breeding plants that can be used. But Olaf has been preparing in advance for this situation. In the past 2 years Vinland doesn't have enough horses, so you can use moose to get it together. If history is not changed, Sweden will train moose cavalry in a few decades or 100 years, and it has also played a certain role in the battle with Tsarist Russia, so Olaf is not worried about whether the moose can be trained into cavalry mounts. In the past 2 years, Olaf has allowed moose to be captured and domesticated everywhere. Among them, the Shalimnir farm in Growth City has domesticated more than 300 moose, Labrador, Huron, and Iroquois. There are also dozens or hundreds of them. Moose is a large herbivorous animal. The body and weight are higher than that of ordinary horses. The endurance speed is no less than that of the top BMW. The only flaw is the difficulty of domestication. However, after 1 or 2 generations of cultivation, it can still be cultivated to be gentle and obedient. It can be applied. Mounted on the battlefield at present, there are a large number of domesticated moose in Vinland. Except for breeding deer, the rest of the male moose have undergone castration training. At present, the formation of a group charge may be worse, but it is no longer a problem to use it to march on the road. More than 95% of the soldiers of the Vinland Sixth Corps are not capable of riding, and they have some running with a moose. It is estimated that at most they can ride on the march before the war. I am afraid that the group charge will not be able to reach it in a short time. Olaf did not have high requirements for the cavalry, and there were already plenty of moose riding instead of horses. Soon the moose were sent to the Shalimnir breeding plant in the city of Heir. The stock of Shalimnir plus the transportation from various places, there are a total of more than 800 moose, of which there are 200 fawns, and there are more than 200 pregnant doe and lactating doe. And the remaining the number used is less than 400. Olaf personally selected 80 or 90 strong and tall from the fawns, plus what Wendland's existing horses can use, and finally made up 503 mounts, and chose a gray-white young moose to stay as a mount. The rest were used as cavalry companions and trained with 500 newly selected strong, powerful and proficient archery soldiers from the 6 legions. Wendland's April is the beginning of the mobilization of the whole people to prepare for the war. The Wendland 6th Corps also began to conduct daily training this month under the leadership of the walking corps and officers at all levels. The training subjects were based on Hudik's original subjects, and later Olaf adjusted some. The pikemen practiced stab and defense in the morning. The musketeers practiced and cued to shoot. Although the current muskets are not rifled, the workmanship is simple, and the range and accuracy of the head are not good, but training can still improve some accuracy in the afternoon. It is to practice the mass march of the army to improve the execution and discipline of orders, and the quality of individual soldiers. More than 80 cavalry provided by each regiment were separated from their respective regiments and directly under Olaf's commander, carrying moose, bows, arrows, flying spears, and spears through the mountains and forests every day. Olaf personally led the moose cavalry, training their riding skills, as well as the ability to coordinate combat under horse and lunge even if the Vinland cavalry trains for another 3 months. It is impossible to have the combat capability of a mature cavalry. Olaf is ready to use his strengths and avoid weaknesses. As long as his cavalry can guarantee to ride a moose and rush, and at the same time not fall behind, it will be considered as a pass. If you want to dismount and use bows and spears to fight, you can only throw flying spears on the back of the deer. This series of combat skills training is mature, and you can cooperate with the army's phalanx to play a role in cover and coordination. Although firearms have developed to the protagonist of the battlefield, the cavalry is still the most brilliant protagonist of the current era, but the European cavalry uses the mobility to charge and intersect combat. The short blunderbuss and the carbine can burst out powerful power. This kind of firearms and the use of cold weapons can be regarded as a groping stage, but it has a great effect when used well. On the whole, the cavalry can play a decisive role in many battles. His Majesty the Protector, who is still nestling in the countryside of Huntington in northeast London, is an expert in cavalry. In the future, he will rule the British Isles and send Charles I to the guillotine by relying on the cavalry trained by himself. Olaf thought he might ask Cromwell to help him train his army. After all, the two of them are friends. Different from the use of firearms in Europe, the cavalry of Daming, Japan and other countries in Asia are still using cold weapons, and currently relying on cavalry and shooting, and the most powerful thing is that they have separated from the Ming dynasty from the post-Golden Eight Banners. Haujin's powerful armed forces are currently all cavalry. They can come and go like wind. They can charge on horseback or dismount at any time during battle. They are both precise and ruthless. In addition, they are brave in combat and good at learning. He also possesses a more powerful general artillery, which has long become the ¡1 force in the Far East. www.uxiaspit.com. The 500 cavalry selected by Olaf are also young and strong, and superior archery warriors. They very similar to the Jurchens of Haujin. Olaf currently does not have enough shotguns for the cavalry, so he can only use them as the 8 banners of Manchuria. It is a fact that the Manchurian 8 banners can be fought very well. Olaf feels that it is also a way to train cavalry lacking firearms into 8 banners elite soldiers. Perhaps the Danish army is not an opponent of Batrow, even if the Batrow cannot defeat the European modern legion in the actual battle in the future. Olaf can only go one way to the black. After all, his Vinland 6th Legion is too backward and needs a lot of supplementary lessons. Relatively speaking, he is the best. Only the cavalry will follow the example of Batrow, and the infantry muskets and lances will cooperate this way. Olaf is not a military genius. Among the people around him, Hudik, Hader, Hagrid, Kadir and others who are the most proficient in military affairs are also far away in Iceland. Olaf wants to train an army that belongs to him and can be used. Random research and training. Olaf, who has experience in later generations, feels that regardless of the difference in weapons and equipment and the quality of individual soldiers, as long as his army can order and prohibit and obey the command, he can have a certain degree of combat effectiveness. Fortunately, the 6 legions in Olaf's hands are all selected young and ignorant indigenous people. More than 90% of them believe that Olaf is of blood, and believes that loyalty and bravery will be exchanged for land, servants, women, livestock, making meritorious deeds will become the sayings of the Viking master. Therefore, the inner obedience of the soldiers of the Vinland 6th Army is close to perfection. The only difference is the level of execution of various combat commands such as forward, backward, and charge. Chapter 238, God in number 039, S Church. During the training, in order to keep up with the nutrition of the soldiers, Olaf was reluctant to treat his soldiers a little bit with food under the supervision of Olaf's personal arrangements. The soldiers of the Vinland 6th Corps had delicious meat and fish in their meals every day, as well as sweet potatoes, pumpkins and other foods. In order to ensure the quality and taste of the food, Olaf eats with his soldiers every day. The indigenous Indian soldiers who have not tasted the food with spices thought that they had eaten the food made by the chef and Harimunir of the Valhalla temple using the pig Shaklimnir and the sheep Heedal, and coupled with Olaf's love of soldiers as a child, equal style of eating, sitting, and training, the soldiers' own loyalty to Olaf has risen invisibly. Most of them are very moved, even more than ever. To be content and warm 2 years ago, Olaf had instructed the Vikings and Indian leaders in the Vinland region to vigorously promote Nordic polytheism to downplay Christianity's control over the people's thinking. Over time, no matter what the purpose is, whether the faith is transferred or not, Vinland's Vikings should vigorously promote Nordic polytheism. Jingren, contract white slaves, and even indigenous slaves have all remembered the interesting and vivid Nordic myths among the native Indians and Inuit. With the simplest thinking, their primitive shaman worship has been enriched into Norse mythology and Christian mythology as a nutrient, and advanced beliefs that have been developed for thousands of years are found in primitive tribes in North America. Under the guidance of the Vikings, the ruler of Vinland, the primitive faith was destroyed. Now all the indigenous people in the 9 regions of Vinland have believed in Vinland's unique Protestantism. This Protestant religion is called the Church of the King of Gods, meaning that after the demise of Odin and other gods and the world tree, the new gods, the Lord was born and created the heaven and the earth, and then the Son of came to the world as the King of man. Heir, Olaf and others are the blood descendants of the kings of God, Odin, Jehovah, and Jesus, and are the only ones who rule the world. The Church of the King of Gods is currently only spread among the indigenous peoples in the Vinland territory. There has not been a systematic church organization, but it has rapidly expanded as soon as it appeared. At present, Olaf, the actual controller of the Church of the King of Gods, simply estimates and already knows the number of believers in the Church of the King of Gods has reached more than 200,000, and it is still infiltrating and spreading to the surrounding Aboriginal ethnic groups that do not belong to the Aboriginal territory managed by Vinland. According to the expansion rate of the King of Gods Church, it may not be 5 years before the entire Indian community in the eastern and northern parts of North America will be infiltrated by the Church. This is a surprise to Olaf, and it will not only lay the foundation for his family's dominance and foundation, just like the Emperor of Japan has the blood of the sun god, and it can also serve various strategic purposes when conquering other tribes to expand their territory in the future. Although the Church of the King of Gods developed in Vinland's tribe, no one believed in the contract white slaves and the Vikings. And even the 2 old priests Dracula Ducao shouted after learning about it heresy. However, after learning that only a group of primitive people were entertaining themselves and that the Church of the King of Gods helped to consolidate the white dominance, the 2 old priests stopped paying attention. The existence of the Church of God Kings was intentional by Olaf. He wanted to bind his family's rule with religious beliefs through the control of people's thoughts by religion, and instill them into the hundreds of thousands of Native American Indians in North America. He believes that only by controlling the minds of the natives of North America can his family stay in peace. Moreover, when the Church of the King of Gods matures, there will be a set of self-justified things that are roughly consistent with the Christian doctrine, and then they can use it to establish the Protestant religions in Iceland and Vinland. Olaf, with the simple concept of the monk touched me and touched it, affirmed that if Charles I of the United Kingdom can be the Pope Emperor of the Anglo Church, that is, the Anglican Church, Olaf may not be the Pope Emperor of the King's Church. In the boring life of the Vinland people, the Vikings and contract white slaves can stabilize their souls by participating in church activities and prayers, and the indigenous people have gradually mastered the know-how, after understanding the operation and development of the church through the current organizer and founder of the King of Gods Church, Blackstone, Olaf was very satisfied with a set of Blackstone's plate armor and a white wolf skin that is becoming increasingly rare from Wenland after Blackstone left. Olaf continued to ride on the grey-white moose he named Hazen with his cavalry on the grass on the edge of Avalon. Time is repeating military training and eating and sleeping day by the time Olaf's opponents of the cavalry, musketeers, and spearmen were basically satisfied. It was already mid-May at this time. The weather has gradually become hot. Although Vinland's latitude is high, it is still time to flourish. The number of British and French ships coming from Europe to North America has been reduced by half compared with previous years. Only some fishing boats are scattered sporadically. For fishing in the Wenland Sea, a small number of merchant ships only dared to dock in Virginia and Plymouth. Only the merchant ships of Crick Company could dock in Harriet City for supply and war business activities, which took only 1 month or 2 on average. That's it. While Olaf's focus is on military training, he has not forgotten the production in various places, especially the mining of Changlingshan gold, copper, and iron ore, as well as the iron ore detection and common sense mining in the west of Hader. Olaf has always as a top priority, we must urge inquiries every half month. A small mining camp has been established on the Nova Scotia Peninsula in the southwest of Vinland Island. The governor of Abenaki, Salak, provided manager Robert with a large number of slaves and supplies, so that Robert would soon bring Changling Mountain to Changling Mountain. Of coal mines moved to the northern part of the Nova Scotia Peninsula on the afternoon of May 10. Robert personally escorted 2 ships of the coal mine back to Harriet City. Olaf was very happy after personally inspecting the coal, because the facts prove that the quality of the coal mines in Nova Scotia is very good. The degree of easy mining is far better than that of Changlingshan coal mine. According to Robert's estimation, the North Island coal mine will be put into operation normally in June of this year. By then, 300,000 to 350,000 pounds of coal will be mined in 1 month, which is enough for Olaf to open a briquettes factory and ship briquettes to Europe for sale. At present, European countries are using coal mines www.uxiaspit.com, but they burn coal for catering and heating mainly, and they all use primary coal mines, that is, loose coal, which is not easy to ignite and is not resistant to burning. As a result, the wealthy people still rely on charcoal. Olaf's briquettes solve the 70–80% problem of loose coal. Olaf believes that as long as they are sold in Europe, they will definitely be able to buy a good price. Olaf also thinks that by then, he will not only buy briquettes, but also let people buy coal. The furnace is also built, and the briquettes are improved, so that the bundle sale will surely be a big hit. Because he has been struggling with the habit of developing Vinland's resources, Olaf will come up with 7 or 8 aspects in every idea. However, the production and sales of briquettes and coal stoves are all things to do. Only to solve the siege of Iceland and make Iceland a free republic. After being thoroughly recognized by the Europa countries, many of his ideas can be put into practice one by one. After 2 reigns in mid-May, Olaf learned from the merchant ship of Crick Company that Denmark had increased a loan of 300,000 yuan from Charles I. He felt that the day when Denmark sent troops might not be far away, worried that he was going to Europe too late and wasted the opportunity to help his father resist Denmark. Olaf felt that the Vinland 6th Army currently possessed a certain level of strength, so he ordered Mr. Hubbard from Hader City shipyard to take all his apprentices with him. The ship departs for the city of Grode on May 24. 15 tall and slender armed warships from the Wenland shipyard sailed into the port of Hrut. In addition to the 3 armed merchant ships with artillery that had been docked in the port, Olaf had 18 ships in his hand. The world-class large warships, although compared with the best Clark and Galen flagship warships in Denmark, Sweden, and the Netherlands, are generally not inferior to the large Galen warships manufactured by the latest technology. Chapter 239, Olaf and Number 039. Expedition 1. Knowing that the ship had entered the port, Olaf hurried over happily, and every ship boarded and checked carefully. He inspected the brand new hull brushed with animal fat, as well as the sturdy wood, canvas, mast, etc., and finally praised Master Hubbard's exquisite craftsmanship with great satisfaction and admiration. Hubbard's slender figure barely stood up, his face scorched by the sun also flushed. Hubbard, who had experienced great ups and downs, thought he had looked down on all the honors, but listening to Olaf complimented himself, Hubbard couldn't help being happy and excited. Although I am 62 years old this year, I feel better and better after coming to Wenland. As long as Master Olaf is willing to let me build ships for Wenland, I think I can do more than 10 years. In the end, Hubbard patted his skinny chest with his dry palm, said in a firm tone, and won a round of applause. The 15 large ships exhausted all the materials and parts that Hubert had brought from Amsterdam. He told Olaf many times that Olaf must buy back enough materials from Europe for this year. Olaf made a promise, and then sent dozens of people to take a rest. The ship entered the port, and the necessary materials were also neatly stacked in the warehouse. Olaf knew the time had come, so on the morning of May 25th, the soldiers of the Vinland Sixth Army began to carry supplies and commodities on the ship. A large amount of precious fur, spirits, caramel, royal jelly, bone china, etc. were put into the middle of more than a dozen large ships. Supplies were put into the lower level because this time Olaf plans to take as many as 10,000 people to Europe. The 18 large ships can only carry more than 6,000 people at most, and the remaining 4,000 people can only take the smaller troop carrier. There are two types of troop carriers in Vinland. One is the long Viking ship built by the Icelandic Vikings. This type of ship is not suitable for crossing the ocean. The other is the double-decker Kirk ship built by the shipyard in recent years. The hull is not big, and one boat can only carry 100 people, but it is strong enough to be able to make long-distance expeditions. Olaf asked Vinland Shipyard to perform maintenance and reinforcement of Vinland's Kirk ship in the spring of this year. Now it comes in handy. A few days later, at noon on May 29th, all the more than 10,000 people from the Vinland Sixth Army entered 18 warships and 30 Kirk ships, and then they blew their trombone and bombs under the order of Olaf. He left Port Herod on the Henkin harp and singing the Viking war hymn. Vinland's expeditionary fleet, composed of 48 large and small ships, actually carried 12,038 people. Except for the old Viking sailors, the remaining sailors were contracted white slaves and experienced Bietak-born slave soldiers. The accident can fully cope with all the problems at sea, especially the large and small ships are led by the ship named Wang Whale that Olaf takes, which reduces a lot of work. Olaf formulated a lot of policy provisions before he left. During his deployment, the local governors were temporarily self-administered by local governors. Tom, Salak, and Yaluki served as army commanders, and the governors of Quebec and Abenaki were governed by local governors. Let Kalak and Harry take over. The Vinland 9 District Governors Joint Council was also established before Olaf left. And the joint will rule Vinland before Olaf's return. The loose self-governing organization is the best state that Olaf feels suitable for Vinland's current development. Even if there are some lags and losses, when Europe is stable and Iceland is fully recognized, he can return to Vinland without any worries. Re-ruling the people at present, Heir and other leadership corps have focused their development on Iceland. This is not only because of cultural identity and homeland complex, but also because Europe is the center of civilization. When you return to Iceland, you will enter the civilized world. However, Olaf knows very well that Iceland, with an area of 100,000 square kilometers, has poor resources and poor environment. It can be said that the development potential is very limited. It does not have the foundation of a powerful or even general country, because Iceland cannot support too many people. Facts have proved there are only 300,000 people in Iceland in the 21st century, so Olaf is determined to hold North America in his hands. As long as he continues to expand the territory of Vinland, he will first hold the territories of the later United States and eastern Canada in his hands. It has a vast fertility. It is only a matter of time before the land develops agriculture, as well as various mineral resources and timber, fishing grounds, and indigenous slaves, etc., to become a powerful country. Olaf believes that Iceland can only be a bridgehead for Vinland to explore Europe, participate in European affairs, and obtain advanced technical talents. The foundation is to develop North America. Olaf and Heine once said, with Iceland, Vinland can also become a great power, but without Vinland, Iceland will never rise, and it may even become a colony again, so you must pay close attention to Vinland and develop Vinland. Olaf's deepest ulterior idea is, as long as he can grasp the 2 or 3 years of his father's return to Iceland to lay a solid foundation and manage Vinland well, in the future, it is his promoted leader in Vinland that will support him to succeed his father. The Centaur and the Vinland Sixth Army in his hand have strong strength, so he is not afraid of his brother Olaf competing with him. At the end of May, the Atlantic Ocean is no longer the calm of the spring, but when the wind and rain in the North Atlantic are still not frequent, Olaf's fleet experienced 2 heavy winds and rains after sailing at sea for a week, tall and strong-armed. The warship was not afraid of wind, rain and waves, but the petite Kirk ship was inevitably damaged. 2 Kirk ships collided by wind and waves, and their hulls were severely damaged and unable to move forward. The fleet was depleted. Olaf had to order people to help the soldiers and sailors on the 2 ships migrate to his own ship, and then encouraged them by saying Vikings are not afraid of wind and rain, and then marched eastward due to the bad weather and fright. The moose and horses in the cabin showed different degrees of illness. Even many soldiers in the fleet also experienced symptoms of vomiting, diarrhea and collapse due to seasickness, but Olaf knew he can only seek treatment until he gets ashore. He can only think of comforting everyone with chicken soup words. After Olaf's persuasive temptation, the physically and mentally tortured patients were still refreshed. Reading www.uucanchu.com gritted his teeth and strengthened his faith and persevered due to the influence of wind and rain. The fleet deviated from the course at first, but after half a month it still approached an unfamiliar continent. Olaf stood at the bow of the ship and looked east. When he could see clearly that the land on the coastline was a huge harbor city, he was relieved, because the vaguely visible harbor city had an architectural style similar to that of the Dutch city. Moreover, in this era, only European countries with developed maritime trade can have such a huge seaport city. There will never be such a city in North Africa. Olaf feels that he may have reached the English Channel or the Bay of Biscay. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, Olaf said to Tom beside him, "Although I don't recognize the city in front of it, it's not in the UK and the Netherlands, but the style is still in Europa. Maybe we are in the south of the Netherlands, or France, or Spain." Tom knows almost nothing about Europe. His experience is as naive as his age. In this regard, he behaves like his peers, not like Olaf, a child prodigy and genius. Tom said hesitantly, "God bless. We finally saw the land, but Olaf, if we were not to the familiar place, would we get into trouble? After all, we have too many boats and people." Olaf knew that Tom was worried that he and others would be regarded as pirates by the people in the port. He hurriedly said, "We hung the banner of the Christ cross to show that we are Christians. Now that Iceland has just become independent, no national flag has appeared. Our family, although the badge is just a simple black cow, there is no preparation on board, and no one recognizes it even if it is prepared and hung on it." Chapter 240, Olaf Goes Out, 2. While Olaf was speaking, dozens of ships of various sizes suddenly sailed out of a port not far away. These ships are known to be warships by looking at the slender figure, the black hole artillery exposed on both sides, and the huge collision angle of the bow. When you approach some Olaf and others, you can see these armed with double-headed eagle flags. The merchant ships and warships were aggressively approaching and encircling the fleet of themselves and others. "Have you encountered pirates? Or are you treated as enemies?" Tom said in surprise. "This is the double-headed eagle in Hapson? Have we arrived in Spain?" Olaf frowned suddenly, and then said loudly, "Hurry up and hang up our flag of the cross. It is estimated that we have arrived in Hapson, the city under the jurisdiction of Fort. Our fleet is too big, and it is estimated that it has attracted the attention of the Navy. It is estimated that they will need to investigate. But if they are unkind, everyone will be prepared for a battle." Olaf's instructions were quickly conveyed. After a while, the two sides approached, and after 2 rounds of semaphores, Olaf was relieved. The other party told Olaf through semaphore in Latin language that they had arrived in Lisbon, a large port city in Spain, Portugal, and the United Kingdom. Olaf also asked the flag bearer to tell the other party that he and the others were businessmen from Iceland who had just returned from Africa after several rounds of exchanges. The Spanish Navy asked to board the ship for inspection in case it was a pirate's disguise. Olaf couldn't refuse, but he could only agree. After a while, a medium-sized ship approached Olaf's flagship, and then handed aboard to him. Then a few soldiers wearing half-length panels came over with muskets vigilantly, and finally one. The officer wearing a golden helmet came up. He first looked at Olaf and others, and then asked Olaf and others about the origin and purpose in standard Latin. Tom and others stepped forward to explain that. Olaf also politely stroked his and said, "We want to enter the port for replenishment, and we can also sell some special products. Maybe you have heard of royal jelly and oriental caramel, water of life. Porcelain is a special product of our Icelandic business group." "Oh," the officer nodded and grinned. "Your products are very famous. If it's not too expensive, I actually want to buy a few bottles of water of life and a few pounds of caramel." Olaf understood, and hurriedly asked Tom to get the certificate of paying taxes in Amsterdam and other places in previous years, as well as a leather bag of water of life and a few pounds of caramel, and then handed it to the officer and said, "This is not for you, but for you. Share with your relatives and friends, and buy if they like." The officer nodded with satisfaction and said, "You are very good. My name is Kata. I am an officer of the Lisbon Navy. I welcome you and your fleet to Lisbon. Please tell me if you need it." and I will ask my friends taste your gift together." Half an hour later, with the help of Cotta, Olaf's fleet was exempted from cumbersome inspections by the Spanish Navy and was then guided into the port. As for the tens of thousands of people, Olaf was fooled by the slaves he bought from the Pacific and South America. Olaf wanted to invite Cotta to have a drink and dinner to express his gratitude, but Cotta said that he was still on duty. And Olaf could only make an appointment until the evening. With the help of Cotta, Olaf first hired several Arab doctors to diagnose and treat the sick soldiers on the ship, and at the same time eliminated sick moose and horses at a low price, and then personally listed his own products on the exchange. In less than an hour, merchants from Portugal and Spain boarded the ship to see the goods. After a simple inspection, Olaf sold 50 cans of caramel and royal jelly, 200 barrels of water of life were also bought, and 50 sets of the best quality bone china were also bought directly. As for the fur, for the time being, no one will come to other goods, because there are not many leather merchants in Portugal and Spain compared to France, the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, and leather goods are not the most popular products in Lisbon, so Olaf prefers spirits and caramel to Spanish and Portuguese people. Porcelain can fully understand. In the evening, Olaf, Tom and others invited Cotta and his men to a sumptuous meal in a luxuriously decorated hotel outside the port. During the dinner, Cotta told Olaf that Spain and Portugal have endless colonies in Central and South America, which provide Europe with a large amount of cane sugar. But the royal jelly and caramel of the Icelandic business group have already affected the interests of Spanish sugar merchants, so many people are inquiring about news. This afternoon Cotta told Olaf that the Portuguese may just be a little greedy, but the Spaniards are not a good thing. Even though Olaf's fleet is large and there are tens of thousands of slaves, the Spaniards are likely to be confused. Olaf understands that Cotta is kind, and although he can say these words does not rule out the suspicion of humiliation, but this also shows that he is probably not safe enough. Maybe someone is already thinking about his fleet. After all, it's an enemy. The existence of my own caramel and royal jelly has affected the business of Spanish sugar merchants. Olaf bid farewell to Cotta after he was full, and then returned to the ship to summon the 6 Legion commanders to talk to his room to discuss how to deal with it. After discussion, Olaf finally decided to leave Lisbon early tomorrow morning and go to Amsterdam, not far to the north, as soon as possible. At present, the most free and protected European business atmosphere is the Netherlands. With the throughput and transaction volume of the Netherlands, Olaf's goods cannot be used. It will be all shot in 3 or 4 days. Olaf also wanted to buy some new muskets to replace the matchlock guns of the 6th Army in Amsterdam through the acquaintances of the East India Company, and on the long-distance journey, more than a dozen mooses stuck in the cabin were sick and needed to buy some horse substitutes. You can buy food, fresh water, cloth, etc. in any city, but the only purchase of arms and ammunition, horses, steel and other military materials must be in Amsterdam. www.oeksjaspit.com. This is because the Netherlands is not strict in order to make money, as long as the money is in place. You can buy it. The second reason is that Olaf and the Dutch East India Company have established a business partnership, through which they can smoothly buy anything that can be bought. Of course, if you want to buy some things, you still have to have a close relationship and pay a very high price, but it happens that Olaf has both relationships and money, and is completely the most loyal friend of the merchants of the United Republic of the Netherlands. Early the next morning, Olaf handed over the tax certificate to the port officials, and then the fleet left the Lisbon dock and headed for the northern Bay of Biscay under the attention of the Navy. After leaving Lisbon, Olaf, Tom and others were grateful for their choice, because there were some unidentified ships tracking behind the fleet. Olaf guessed that they were merchants from Spain or Portugal, but their number of ships was not large. Many. If you really start your hands, you won't be the opponent of your fleet at all. During the alert northward voyage, the ships behind him gradually disappeared in less than half a day. Olaf knew this was because Spain had too few maritime personnel and ships, so he dared not chase it anymore. If he stayed in Lisbon for a few more days, maybe the group of people who tracked him would recruit enough manned ships. It was a fight. Cotta is very kind, Tom said in admiration. If we have the opportunity, maybe we can be a long-term friend with him. Olaf nodded and said, next time we bring enough soldiers, I think we can give Cotta a fortune to thank him. He has proved that he is our friend and saves us at trouble. Chapter 241, Olaf and Number 039, S Expedition, 3. Olaf's fleet passed through the Bay of Biscay and the English Channel into the calm North Sea 3 days after leaving Lisbon. Entering the North Sea, standing on the deck, there are gradually more ships on the sea. Although every ship seems to be a merchant ship, many merchant ships from England, Iceland, and Norway may actually become pirate ships at any time. Robbery. Olaf's fleet was a huge monster in the North Sea, and all ships avoided seeing Olaf's fleet. It took more than a long time for Olaf to see the sea from the bow of the ship, and an artificially excavated Grand Canal appeared on the land northeast. It is an artificial canal that runs through the North Sea and the Dutch province. It is the Grand Canal built by the hard-working Dutch 20 years ago. Ever since the canal passed through the Netherlands, the sea has been continuously reclaimed to create land, first turning the ocean into Lake IJsselmeer, and then gradually eroding the Lake IJsselmeer, turning the southern part of the Great Lake into land. A few years ago, the IJsselmeer even restricted the navigation of large ships. It is said that the Netherlands is preparing to completely build a large embankment in the north. As a small lowland country, the population and territory of the Netherlands is far less than that of the United Kingdom and France. The spirit really surpassed any country of the time, so it is logical to rise up and become a sea carriage driver. This intra-city canal that runs from the North Sea to the southeast to Amsterdam has made outstanding contributions to the economic development of the Netherlands and is also the main cornerstone of helping the Netherlands to take the road to hegemony in Shanghai, in contrast to Denmark's claim of taking over the Baltic Sea estuary to charge tolls. The Netherlands has been entrusted like a white lotus by digging canals at its own expense to facilitate the seagoing ships of various countries without charging a penny of tolls. Olaf understands that the success of the Dutch is because they understand that the transportation is convenient and the business is developed, and all the money is available. However, Denmark only knows the wool, which has caused several countries in the eastern part of the Baltic Sea to be full of resentment, leading to Copenhagen's. The business atmosphere has been declining for nearly 100 years, and is now far inferior to metropolises such as London, Lisbon, and Paris, let alone compared to Amsterdam. The fleet walked through the canal for more than 3 hours before entering the canal of the inner city of Amsterdam, and then stopped at Westport, which opened up a large number of docks and port areas in Hennen and Hebei. Now the canal in the inner city of Holland is still expanding. Since entering Amsterdam, Olaf can clearly see the vigor and vitality of the city at his feet, and the faces of pedestrians on the street are looking forward to the future. This is a place where Icelanders, even British and Portuguese, are not as good as Dutch. Raf thinks that as Vikings have a positive temperament no less than that of the Dutch. Soon, under the guidance of the flag bearer, the fleet entered the port and stopped, and then set up a pallet to board the ship's rail. The tax collectors and soldiers waiting in the port swaggered onto the deck after using Dutch and French to find that Olaf and others were indifferent. The middle-aged tax collector said in English, "Which merchant are you, Olaf?" Barely understood this time, and said in English, "We are a caravan from Iceland and come to Amsterdam to sell specialty products. We come every year and know the rules." The tax collector nodded and said, "You know that I will save trouble. Go to the exchange to do business." Recently, Sweden has fought against Austria and Germany, and Denmark is also going to attack any major country in your Iceland. We have food, wine, etc. in Amsterdam. Many things have gone up in price, and you Icelanders can also make a fortune with their dried and salted fish and the water of life. Olaf and Tom's expressions changed when they heard the words. They held the tax officer and asked, "When did Denmark send out troops? What is the situation like?" The tax official frowned, broke free from Olaf and Tom, and said coldly, "I don't know, just ask the merchants in the north." After saying that, the tax officer took the guards and left, muttering and cursing as he walked. Insolent barbarian, Yankee. Olaf, Tom and others would get angry when they heard it, but now they are not thinking. Olaf, it seems that we are still late. Denmark has already started, let's go and support it right away, Tom calmly said with a pale face. Pick, who has never said a word from hiding behind on such occasions, worrying that it will affect the master's thoughts. Olaf groaned, and the commanders of the other ships, Salrak, Yaluki, Polly, and Bjorn, also came to Olaf's ship one after another, and learned from Tom that Denmark had sent troops. Olaf, what do you say we do? Do you want to go to Iceland right now? No. I think we should ask for more information. Several people were chattering. Olaf waved his hand gently and said, "Don't worry. We don't know the specifics yet. We need to find some Danish businessmen in Amsterdam to ask. Even if Denmark has already attacked Iceland, we don't worry. Iceland has been prepared for a long time. There are 9,000 Viking fighters and cannons and muskets to defend Reykjavik. It is impossible to be broken by the Danes in half a month in October. If you are lucky, you can repeat the last victory." After Olaf finished speaking, everyone stopped talking, because years of habit allowed them to adapt to Olaf's decision. "What do you think we should do?" The 19-year-old Yilukibulin and Polly are 3 or 4 years younger than Polly, but he died accidentally because of his father. A few years ago, he served as the leader of the oars, leading slaves and Vikings. The years of training made him very mature and experienced, and his position has also been promoted to the captain of the boat. He took the lead in expressing his opinion. Yiluki's words brought everyone back to their senses, and suppressed the panic in their hearts when they heard the attack on Iceland and northern Denmark, and looked at Olaf. Olaf said to Yilugi, "You take Tom and others to the exchange to list first, and if someone comes to buy, sell it at the price I set. I, Piku and Bjorn, go to the East India Company's assistant. See if you can ask for the latest news." After speaking, Olaf turned around and changed his clothes in the cabin. Coming to Amsterdam is no better than in Finland. This is a highly hierarchical one. Dressing and speaking and manners represent the world of identity and etiquette. Olaf wants to visit the top executives of the Dutch East India Company, even if you have cooperated many times before. You still have to put on gorgeous clothes and show respect. After a while, Olaf walked out wearing a robe and cotton trousers sewn with the finest velvet fabric of the Far East, and wearing calfskin boots. Olaf has blonde hair, golden fluff on his upper lip and chin, bright eyes, fair skin, and a tall nose. With his tall body, he looks like a Nordic aristocrat walking out of an oil painting. After half an hour, dark clouds suddenly appeared in the sky and dense raindrops began to fall. Pedestrians on the streets of Amsterdam speeded up their pace and took refuge under the eaves of the shops. Some pedestrians had umbrellas, so they started to fight without rush. A carriage slowly crossed the street and stopped in front of the East India Company Stock Exchange in Amsterdam. Behind the stock exchange is the East India Company's residence. The coachman hurriedly got out of the car and opened the door. "Dear sir, the East India Company is here." www.uxiaspit.com. Piku and Bren got out of the carriage, and then took an umbrella from under the arm and opened it on the door. Olaf got out of the car with a light cough. Bren threw 2 silver coins to the coachman, and the 3 of them walked into the tall and majestic gate of the East India Company on the wet road. Amid the gratitude of the coachman, 3 gentlemen. "Who are you looking for?" Olaf and the 3 walked into the lobby of the East India Company. Before they could look around, a delicate girl in a silk dress came up and said in standard Latin. Olaf smiled softly and said, "I am Olaf from Iceland. I want to find Mr. Frederick Kinai. He used to be a business assistant in Batavia in East India. He and I are friends and have some business activities." The girl thought slightly, then smiled. "Mr. Kinai has been promoted to commercial commissioner this year. He is still in Batavia and has not returned." "That's really to congratulate him?" Olaf asked with surprise on his face. "Is Mr. Kinai's assistant still there?" "For the past 2 years, I have contacted him through his assistant, Mr. Hans, or cooperated." "Is Mr. Hans here?" The girl nodded and said, "Mr. Hans has followed the manager to the pier." "Wait a moment." After Olaf nodded, the 3 were taken by the girl to a room on the side of the hall to wait. Olaf sat down on the sofa and did not speak. 20 or 30 minutes later, a thin man wearing a jacket and showing his shirt collar walked into the hall under an umbrella. The girl stepped forward and whispered, "Mr. Hans, your friend Mr. Olaf is waiting for you." Hans raised his brows and said, "Okay, take me over." Chapter 242, The Siege of Reykjavik, 1. The wooden door creaked and was pushed open. Olaf raised his eyes and saw Hans, who had met before. He hurriedly got up and walked over and stretched out his right hand. "Mr. Hans, long time no see." Hans was still arrogant before entering the door, but he instantly became enthusiastic when he saw Olaf. He smiled to meet Olaf and squeezed Olaf's large palm, looked up at the tall young man, and said, "God is looking forward to your arrival, Mr. Olaf, and sent someone to the port to inquire the other day, haha." The girl closed the door and retired amidst the hearty laughter of the 2. Olaf and Hans sat down and talked. Olaf first introduced Tom and Piku to Hans, and then asked impatiently, "Hans, your company is well informed. I just came back from North America and I heard that Denmark has already done something to Iceland. Is it true?" Hans, on behalf of Kinai, has cooperated with Olaf many times and has seen Hagrid and Olaf more than once, so he knows a little about Olaf and others. However, the size of the Netherlands is limited. It is already the biggest effort to manage the East India Company well. Therefore, the people of the East India Company are not jealous of the Icelanders' development in the West India region because of their understanding. Hans and some company executives learned last year that Olaf and Olaf's father, Heir, had made great powers in Iceland and founded the country. After all, The defeat of Denmark quickly spread throughout Europe. It's just that for the staff of the Dutch East India Company, the cold and barren Iceland is not a good place. They never pay attention to poorer places, nor do they care about this matter. I just heard that after the Danish expedition failed, they would block Iceland. The Dutch marveled at the fact that the Icelanders are indeed the descendants of Vikings, and they are indeed full of military virtues. At the same time, they also saw the opportunity to make money. So starting last year, Dutch businessmen intensified business activities with Icelandic merchants, and even more merchant ships sent to Iceland than in previous years. Hans understood as soon as Olaf's words fell. He whispered, "I also just got the news, because you haven't come until June this year. I'm worrying about how to notify you these days." Cough. On the 16th of last month, Christian IV made his son-in-law Magnus the commander-in-chief of the Danish expeditionary force and set off. Reykjavik was blocked 2 weeks ago. It is said that it has always been a tentative attack. There is no news to prove that Iceland has been breached. You can rest assured, Olaf. Hans' explanation is clear and brief. This is his language habit. Olaf nodded and said, "Thank you. God bless you. How many troops has Denmark organized this time? How many ships have been dispatched?" Hans tweeted, and said, "With a British loan, Denmark seems to want to do a good job." According to the Danish side, the soldiers recruited by Christian IV in his country plus the corps hired, total there are more than 30,000 soldiers, not counting the troop transport ships. There are more than 80 warships. Tusk, Denmark is really a big deal. They have not recovered their vitality after consecutive defeats, but they can mobilize so many soldiers and warships, it seems to be overwhelmed. Allworth, Hans's exclamation. Olaf has no intention of listening. He is worried about his father and mother in Iceland, because Denmark's 80 warships and 30,000 soldiers this time are more than twice as much as the last time they attacked Iceland. The strength of the army the last time Iceland's victory was due to luck and the Danes' underestimation of the enemy, but this time the Danes probably won't be careless. The crushing force has already marked that Iceland has not faced the mighty Danish warships and expeditionary forces. The power to fight back is the only option to parry and defend. Although Olaf is worried about the safety of Iceland, he is also assured of the military qualities and skills of his father, uncle, Hudic and others. He knows that although Denmark has a strong army and fleet, he wants to conquer and prepare for half a year in a short period of time. Many Reykjavik are also delusional. If Iceland can keep defending, over time, the lack of supply of the Danish army will retreat. Olaf reckons that Heir and the others are also thinking about consuming it and consuming Denmark to retreat. Without the existence of Olaf's army, it would be Iceland's best strategy to consume it, but Olaf was not reconciled. He was talking to Hans while thinking about tactics. After a while, he thought about several strategies. The way to deal with it. After asking about the situation in Denmark for a long time, Olaf knew what was happening, and then asked, "I heard that Mr. Kie has been promoted." "What a good thing." "Yes. Mr. Kie has outstanding work and is very popular. He sent me a letter of recommendation last month, asking me to take his place," Hans said with a smile. "That's really a double happiness." "Congratulations, Mr. Hans." Olaf hurriedly took out a small bag of gold dross from his arms, handed it over and said, "This dim sum is to thank you for your long-term help." Hans finally felt a heavy weight and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Olaf. Do you want me to help you?" Olaf is not polite, and said, "I need to return to Iceland as soon as possible, so the existing goods on the ship will be packaged for you. The price must be fairer for Mr. Hans, and then I will replace all the goods with artillery and muskets. The supporting ammunition, please help me finish it as soon as possible." Hans frowned and said, "These two things are not difficult to do, but it is difficult to do it together quickly. But Olaf, you are my friend, it doesn't hurt to make trouble." After speaking, Hans walked out quickly without waiting for Olaf's thanks, and soon took 2 East India Company employees into the room. "Mr. Olaf, let's go to the dock together. I need to check the goods, then please come with me." Olaf got up and took the felt hat on the tabletop and put it on. Then said Olaf took Hans and the others back to the dock, boarded the ship and counted the merchandise. After fierce bargaining, Hans finally gave Olaf a 10% higher price than last year to purchase all the merchandise as a whole this year. Due to the tension of the war, the prices of all kinds of materials are constantly rising. If Olaf is not in a hurry and slowly sells the goods on the ship, he can definitely sell more than 20% more Dutch guilders, but what he lacks most now is time, so I can only admit that I have suffered. At noon the next day, Except for some dried meat and dried fish left for use, all the various commodities on the ship were removed. www.uxiaspit.com. After handing over the business with Hans, Olaf took out the previous piece of 20,000 Holland. The stubs and checks of the shield allow Tom to buy food and fresh water and other supplies. He is ready to leave Amsterdam at any time, as long as Hans has 5,000 muskets and 60 24-pounder guns and the corresponding weapons. Once the ammunition was delivered, Olaf could immediately lead the fleet. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. During these 3 days, Olaf was very anxious. He sent people to ask Hans many times. It was not until Hans came to the dock to tell Olaf to deliver the goods tonight. Tormented in the evening, Olaf and Tom, Piku, Bjorn, and other 6 army commanders brought the most elite guards to huts and dozens of munitions and ammunition drawn by carriages. After the cooperation of cranes and personnel, all the items were finally moved to Olaf's flagship and the adjacent Galen ship. Early the next morning, heavy artillery, boxes of ammunition and guns, etc., may take 3 days to be carried by sailors. However, with the help of advanced tools such as cranes, pulleys, winches, and pulley power vehicles that can be seen everywhere in Dutch shipyards and docks, the Netherlands does not. Whether it is shipbuilding efficiency and speed or cargo loading and unloading efficiency is far superior to other European countries. This is also the main support for the sudden rise of the small Netherlands. The goods were sold and the arms were bought. One of the main tasks of the European party was completed, and the rest was the task of resolving the Iceland crisis. Olaf was no longer urgent now. He happily shook hands with Hans to bid farewell. After a while, the fleet that had been released by the Dutch Navy crossed the canal and entered the North Sea smoothly and headed north. Chapter 243, The Siege of Reykjavik, 2. Iceland stands in the far northwest of the Europa continent. It is an isolated island far away from the mainland. However, unlike the fertile British Isles, Iceland's land is barren and the environment is harsh, and it has been little known for hundreds of thousands of years. For hundreds of years, the wars that have frequently appeared on the mainland have been far away from Iceland, making Iceland just like its name, like a paradise. But now, the capital of Iceland and also the largest city, Reykjavik, has dozens of large and small warships parked on the sea west of Reykjavik. All warships are flying the Danish red-bottomed and white cross king flag. It means that they are all Danish troops, and warships in the center of the fleet is the largest 4-story Galen ship. In addition to the Danish royal flag, there is also the royal lion emblem. This marks the imperial minister of the royal family, and the supreme commander Magnus is on board. 1 nautical mile to the east of the fleet is the port of Reykjavik, but there is no warship in front of the port. Except for the scattered houses on the ground of the port, there are 2 newly built bastions in the north and south on the coast. This is obviously the preparation of the Free Republic of Iceland to deal with the incoming enemy. It has been 2 days since the Danish expeditionary force arrived in front of Reykjavik. This time Magnus has obviously become very cautious, and it can even be said to be excessively cautious. Magnus first dropped the boat from the warship, and dispatched his skillful soldiers to row the boat close to the port. After being frightened by the bows and artillery in the bastion, Magnus tried to find out what Hader had arranged at the pier. The firepower is still fierce. After observing for a long time, Magnus dispatched 12 Clark-type warships into the harbor in an arrow shape. At the same time, the artillery on both sides and bow of the ship was ignited by the soldiers and directed towards the 2 huge bastions on the dock. After the bombardment, dozens of shells in the first round were all missed. Under the adjustment of the soldiers, the 12 warships adjusted their positions during the firing. It was not until the 3rd round that half of the shells hit the bastion, but the 2 sides fort did not respond. Facts have proved that the bastion is one of all the buildings that are full of defensive points on the anti-bombardment. The bastion on the dock was not obviously damaged. After more than a dozen shells immediately afterwards, the bastion began to use cannons to fight back from the thick copper pipes deep in the blast holes between the corners and the cracks. More than 4 hours of shelling was the theme of the first day's battle. Magnus ordered the fleet to retreat until 2 ships were beaten up and down, wounded, and nearly sunk. Through the telescope, Magnus found that the 2 bastions of the pier were only slightly damaged. If the damage schedule is followed, the battleship and the bastion are blasted down, and it will probably take half a month to destroy the bastions. Fort, and the warship has to pay a high price. Magnus knew that a strong attack was not a good strategy, but the fleet could not get close to Reykjavik without taking the bastion. He waited until night to send a small boat to carry the soldiers ashore to make a surprise attack, but after the bastion, hundreds of people came out. The Icelandic knight killed the Danish soldiers who had landed in a rush, and jumped into the sea to escape back to the ship on the second day. Magnus discovered that the bastion had been repaired overnight by the Icelanders. He knew that it would be difficult to break the bastion and land ashore, or it would be difficult to enter Reykjavik without paying a great price, but Magnus was killed by Heidir's Viking soldiers last time. He was worried that he would lose too much strength by pressing everyone on to break the bastion. It would be very difficult to enter Reykjavik and encounter an ambush raid. Maybe defeated again, Magnus can no longer accept his failure, so the pressured Magnus has been holding a meeting of generals in the flagship to discuss plans to attack Reykjavik. 2 days passed quickly. After everyone's discussion, Magnus finally accepted the suggestion of Kormafo, the eldest son of Norwegian Governor Christian, and prepared to send soldiers to find suitable locations in the north and south of Reykjavik. After landing, the army gathered and swept all the way into Reykjavik. According to Kormafo, since the Reykjavik pier has heavy troops and cavalry deployed by Heidir, and even a bastion, it is foreseeable that the attack will be very difficult, and the attack on Reykjavik's port will require at a high price, and the time consuming is not short. It is better to use the strengths of the Danish army to land from other weak defensive places in Iceland, and then attack Reykjavik by land, even if it costs too much. Over time, but the difficulty has been reduced a lot. Christian was suddenly bedridden since last winter. Christian IV sent an imperial doctor to treat his uncle. After the imperial doctor's careful treatment, Christian has completely fallen into coma. When the Danish expeditionary force was formed, Christian IV respected the request of his uncle Christian, who was already seriously ill, during his sober period, and appointed his uncle's eldest son Kormafo as chief of staff to follow Magnus on the expedition. Kormafo's advice is sophisticated and accurate. It is a special targeting strategy made in accordance with the Icelandic situation. Kormafo is just an ordinary Danish nobleman. Although he also went to university in Copenhagen, he majored in botany. The war cannot be said to be very professional. It can also be said to know nothing about it. Magnus admired Kormafo's strategic vision, but he didn't know that the landing attack plan that Kormafo set against Iceland's defects was actually a strategy that Christian had racked his brains to come up with, but poor medical conditions. Christian didn't wait until he attacked Iceland again and used a clever trick, so he had to hand it over to Kormafo to implement it. Christian collected all the information about Iceland www.wuxiaspit.com and started studying the map of Iceland for a long time. He believes that Iceland and the Danish army have 3 major shortcomings. The first is the large gap in naval power and the number of warships in Iceland. It is less than 1/10 that of Denmark, so Denmark has fully grasped the initiative to attack Iceland, and can block Iceland with a large number of warships at any time. The second flaw is that Iceland's population is too small, with only more than 60,000 people. Even if all the strong men are trained as militias, they have enough weapons, but they can only produce 10,000 to 20,000 troops. This mob only has to face it. The Danish Iron Army was definitely defeated by one blow. The third flaw is Iceland's geographical and climatic flaws. Iceland has a large area and sparsely populated areas, and there are many glacial wastelands on the island, so people gather to live. Reykjavik alone has half or even more residents, so only Iceland. There are no conditions for strategic depth and persistence in the war of attrition. As long as the Danish side can win Reykjavik, it means that it has taken Iceland. Even if Heidir and other thieves fled into the deep mountains and forests of the island with a large army, Denmark does not need to hunt down, as long as Rek is blocked. The ports on all sides of Javik and Iceland, lack of resources, harsh environment, and even the bone-to-shoulder cold of the glacial wasteland at night can help the Danish army defeat the thieves such as Heidir. Christian saw that the focus of Iceland's fortified battle was Reykjavik. Whoever occupies Reykjavik is the ruler of Iceland. Heidir defended Reykjavik and in the end always allowed Denmark to retreat. Denmark occupied Reykjavik, and Heidir and other high-level officials in the Free Republic of Iceland were all inevitable. The error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com, like the Rise of Iceland. Please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244, The Siege of Reykjavik, 3. The problems that Christian can see can also be seen by Heir, Heine, Olaf, Hadarsson, Husgard, and Kadir. That's why they built a bastion at the pier at all costs. A total of 3,000 Viking soldiers of 2 legions and 200 precious cavalry were deployed in several strategic locations outside the country. Upstairs in the Guagwang mansion, Olaf, dressed in military uniform, stood in front of the window and looked towards the pier with a telescope. Since yesterday, the senior officials of Viking Ledang have been watching every move of the wharf in the official mansion, and Hagrid also commanded the cavalry and the bastion at the wharf last night. In the room behind Olaf, Heir wore a breastplate and sat on the sofa to discuss with Heine and Hadarsson about various possible offensive possibilities that Denmark might take. After 10 minutes, there was a rush of dull footsteps, and Hagrid walked in wearing a half-length plate armor. He was wearing a steel helmet, holding a short blunderbuss in his left hand, and holding the wooden handle of the large axe in his right hand. Eagerly, Heir, Hadarsson, Hagrid said solemnly, I saw in the bastion that the Danish warships were reduced by half. That half seem to have left, but I don't think they will leave. Heine, tell me if the Danes have any conspiracy. Oh, Heine, Heir and others frowned upon hearing this at this critical juncture of life and death. No one at the top of Iceland would take the Danish commander and soldiers lightly. We have placed enough troops on the pier, as well as the bastion. Did Magnus find that the attack was not easy, so he divided his troops to other ports? Want to attack Duggan by land? Heine. Hadarsson immediately before speaking got up and said, probably. Heine frowned. Denmark left half of its warships to block the port and dispatched half of its troops to land from other places, and then attack Reykjavik. This is not surprising. After all, Magnus is also Danish star. At present, Denmark is coming across the sea and it is difficult to supply supplies. They can't fight for a long time. They don't want to take the risk to storm the port. They can only choose other landing points and attack by land. Yes, Olaf walked to Hagrid and said in a deep voice, Heine is right. We can't wait. We have to use our familiarity with the terrain to go to the landable area near Duggan to prepare in advance and launch the attack first. When the Danish army landed, it was in chaos. While speaking, Olaf looked at Heir and Hadarsson with piercing eyes. Heir and Hadarsson both looked applauded, but Husgard said coldly, the number and quality of the Danish army surpasses us. We have a very small advantage in the field on flat ground. Any carelessness will lead to heavy losses. I think it's not appropriate to take too much risk. It's better to hurry up and build fortifications in the eastern district and the city. Husgard's opinion also made Hadarsson and Heir nodded, while Heine fell into deep thought. Reykjavik is the only big city in Iceland. There are 20,000 citizens in the dock and central area, as well as in the northern, southern and eastern districts. There are also nearly 10,000 in the villages under the jurisdiction of the northern and southern districts, although they are far less than a few hundred. In the next year, the area of the city is large, but the framework already exists. The pier and the central area are located on the small long peninsula at the eastern end of Reykjavik. After the central area is the Toning Lake, which is smoky all year round because of geothermal heat. The former governor mansion, the current Guagwang mansion, is just behind the square on the east side of Toning Lake. To the east of the Guagwang mansion is the eastern area where the rich live. The north and south directions are also residential areas where citizens live. This pattern has basically been maintained. There has been no change in hundreds of years because of the special narrow terrain of the wharf and the central area. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack, and with the existence of the bastion, it was indeed built into solid existence by Heir and others. However, the entire Reykjavik is built on a larger peninsula. The northernmost part of the northern part and the southern part of the southern part are both coastlines, and are not suitable for ships to dock. In addition, there are guards in each area to maintain order and prevent people from disordering. Even if Danish soldiers want to land on the northern and southern coasts of Reykjavik in small boats, they will be spotted for the first time, so everyone is not worried about the problems in the northern and southern districts. In the eyes of Heir, Olaf, Hadarsson, Husgard, and others, they have already focused on the eastern part of Reykjavik, and the eastern part of the eastern part faces the north, south and east of Iceland. For the roads in the 3 directions to the east, Icelanders outside of Reykjavik, if they come by land without using a boat, must first surround the eastern zone. Therefore, if the Danish army has to look for places outside of Reykjavik, landing at the location, and then attacking Reykjavik, must start from the east. What Husgard means is that the Icelanders have few troops and are not suitable for expendable field battles with the Danish army. It would be better to build fortifications in the eastern zone. The eastern zone is the first place to attack Dagon by land. We must defend the eastern zone with all our strength, but Olaf's opinion is also good. After discussing with Hudic for a long time, Heine groaned, "It's better to send a small group of cavalry with the best marksmanship to explore both the north and the south, and report quickly when the Danish army has landed, while harassing them and weakening the Danes' morale, slow down their march, and prepare us to win time." His Royal Highness Hader, what do you think? Heine's cultural level is the highest among Vikings. He has a family history and is good at learning. More importantly, he has been communicating with Olaf for several years. In addition, he has been devoted to studying the battles of the European War in recent years. With ancient and modern famous generals, the research on strategy has also reached a higher level. After discussing with Hudic and other generals, Heine also came up with a relatively better response. Hader agreed without thinking, and then ordered Olaf and Hagrid to take the cavalry along the coast to the north and south. Explore www.uxiaspit.com. After Hagrid and Olaf told him to leave, Hader looked at Hudic and said, "You personally command the 3 corps to find a place to garrison in the eastern district. The Danish warship outside the pier has not yet been evacuated. The government can't be without people. Hoskard, you and Hudic go to the east side. Kadir and Highness A. The atmosphere in the National Palace is dignified. Everyone knows that every decision in deployment is related to Iceland and the future of everyone present here. Everyone feels that their burdens are very heavy." Hudic bowed solemnly, then Hader shook hands cordially before turning and leaving. Half a month ago, 5 leading generals and 5 corps moved into Reykjavik. Hader did not hesitate to take all the money, grains, meat, etc. from the national treasury and the national treasury. After coming out, part of the rewards were given to the soldiers, and more were used as consumables to support the diet of 30,000 people in the small city of Reykjavik, because there are potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkins and other foods sent from Wetland last year, as well as rye, oats and other grains bought in the Netherlands, plus dried fish and pickled salted fish that were dried last year. The National Treasury's inventory alone enough to fill the city with more than 10,000 soldiers and tens of thousands of citizens to consume for a year, plus the materials from the government's private treasury. It will be enough for the winter next year. The logistical support is extremely sufficient, which makes Hader and other leaders, as well as Viking soldiers, Dagon citizens, etc., all have more confidence. Although they cannot have the confidence in whether they can defeat Denmark, they protect their homeland and consume the Danes. It is not a problem to consume the Danes to leave voluntarily. The error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com. Like the Rise of Iceland, please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. Chapter 245, The Siege of Reykjavik, 4. The disappearance of nearly half of the Danish warships made Hader and others alert for the first time, and guessed that Magnus wanted to find another place to land indeed or to attack Dagon. Hader stayed in the National Palace to command the battle, while Hudic and Hoskard took more than 3,000 Viking soldiers to the streets of the Eastern District. When he was in place, Hudic expelled the residents facing the street, and then dispatched most of the soldiers to hide in the room to prepare, and a small number of soldiers used tools to destroy the road, dig trenches, and arrange traps in the ditch. Hudic and Hoskard know the burdens on their shoulders, so they have made up their minds that they will not allow the Danish army to break through the eastern defense line. They will not hesitate to work hard, personally organize personnel to strengthen the house, and at the same time bring them together. The 6 24-pounder gun mounts were on the yard of the former Sigforth house, the highest in the Eastern District. The Sigforth's yard is the largest house in the east side. It is high on the ground, but it was burned to ruins by Hagrid last year. Since then, it has become a bald and black mound, which just happened to be overlooked by a cannon. The streets of the east side, thousands of feet away, in the busy work of strengthening the fortifications. Time passed bit by bit. In the afternoon, Hudic, standing behind the trench, suddenly heard the sound of horseshoes coming from the northeast. He waved his hand to silence the surrounding soldiers, and then, struggling to jump over the trench, standing on the mound and looking into the distance. In the distance, you can see the black oil ground covered with grass and few trees. 2 Viking knights riding on healthy horses slowly appeared on the flat land of the northeast. Dada. The sound of horses' hoofs gradually approached, and when the 2 cavalrymen arrived in front of Hudic, Hoskard also heard the news. "You found the Danes?" Hoskard asked anxiously. The 2 cavalry stood up and dismounted, and the leader gasped and said, "Your Excellency. We followed His Highness Olaf to the north to find the whereabouts of the Danish army. We found Danes who had landed ashore in the Whale Fjord and were reorganizing their formation. His Highness Olaf saw that there were 5,000 or 6,000 people in the other party, including more than 1,000 cavalry, and 4 cannons. He ordered us to report back first. His Highness left to restrain and harass the other party." Hudic and Hoskard looked at each other. Both knew that what Olaf had discovered was only a small part of the Danish expeditionary force, but the military strength and weaponry were much better than last year, which shows that Denmark has exhausted everything this time. The enemy is coming soon, everyone is ready, the musket is loaded with the bullets, the gunpowder is pressed, the spearman remembers his duty. Listen to my slogan. Hudic turned and called out loudly. As the orders and demands of the two generals Hudic and Hoskeld were passed on, the defense line of the eastern zone was tightened again. Except for the breathing of soldiers and the sound of horses' noses, the entire eastern zone was almost as quiet as winter. About half an hour later, the sun was already close to the sea level in the west, and Hudic and others waited for Hagrid and others who came from the south. Hagrid personally led the cavalry back in gallop, and each horse had 1 or 2 Viking citizens besides the cavalry. "What's the matter with Hagrid?" Hudic asked with a frown when Hagrid stopped in front of the trench. "Hey, the Danish waffle has landed near the village of Grote. When I arrived, the Danish dog stuff was being burned and looted in the villages of Will and Grote. 5,000 or 6,000 people landed in the south, but scattered to 3 villages in Sersiana district to looting and killing people. I can only fight to kill 100 Danish chopsticks that entered the village of Harald, and bring back the remaining villagers." Hagrid first reached out and put a young man behind him under the horse, then jumped off the horse, cursing with ferocity on his face. Hagrid's southwest Viking general was stationed in the village of Harald. The Danish army raged near the village of Harald, apparently slapped Hagrid in the face and killed many people. Hagrid was furious and angry at this situation. Endless Hudic and Hoskard were also furious, but because Heir became a great duke, all the people in the village were ascended to heaven and moved to Dagon to live. There are only a few families of Viking soldiers in Harald, and the population is small. It is the other 2 villages that have suffered the most serious injuries. For example, in Will village, hundreds of people have been killed and robbed. Our forces are limited, we can't go to the rescue, we can only wait to avenge them. Hudic's eyes flickered fiercely, and said sharply. Hoskard spit out thick sputum and cursed, "Danish ghosts. I have to chop off their heads." Hagrid grinned, "I killed a lot of Danes in the village of Harald. They sent cavalry to chase me when they were not angry. I killed another 20 or 30 and dumped them on the road. It is estimated that the Danes will come soon. That's it. Let's prepare for the battle." Hudic coughed lightly and said, "Hoskard and I did defensive fortifications. The yard of Sigforth's house has become a high slope. The artillery is there. When the Danish soldiers get close to the eastern zone, they can hit them head on. Now." And, the 3 of Hagrid were talking. The soldiers of the 2 regiments stationed in the eastern zone also learned that the Danish soldiers had landed and were raging in the village of Harald. Some soldiers escorted them with cavalry at the request of Hoskard. The villagers of the villagers went to rest in the room in the east area, and the remaining soldiers were resentful and clenched their weapons. The 2 regiments brought by Hudic and Hoskard are the northeast leading army and the southeast leading army. They are their confidants. They are not related to the people in Harald village, so they just feel like the enemy, but they are also improved a lot of fighting spirit. If the soldiers of the Southwest Thunder Corps stationed at the wharf learn that their home has been harmed by the Danes, they will probably explode soon. Time passed bit by bit, and the streets of the east side were completely broken and destroyed. Trenches, traps, and roadblocks were everywhere. Behind them were Viking musketeers and spearmen who were waiting in line. The walls, doors and windows were reinforced by wooden boards. There are also hidden Viking soldiers in the house. Hudic and Hoskard stand on the artillery position. Hagrid takes the cavalry to rest in the street not far away. Everyone is ready, waiting for the northern landing and the southern landing. The Danish army appeared, the sky dimmed bit by bit. Just when the sun was about to disappear and things in the distance could not be seen clearly, Hudic, who had the best eyesight, suddenly squinted his eyes and pointed to the far northeast, and said in a deep voice, "That is what? Cavalry." It seemed that he was responding to Hudic's judgment, and the sound of horseshoes grew louder and louder like thunder. A group of cavalry was more and more clearly reflected in the eyes of the Viking soldiers who were waiting in the formation. All of them clenched their weapons and held their breath until the cavalry got closer. Hudic and Huskard and others discovered that the leader was a tall Olav. It's Olav. Olav was dressed in weather, and there were only 70 or 80 cavalry behind him. When they approached the east side, they saw Hudic and Huskard riding horses coming out of the chaos like a construction site. Quick! The Danish cavalry is behind us. Quickly let us in and wait to stop them. Olav had no time to say more, and shouted dumbly. Hudic's face changed, and he waved his hand to let his soldiers remove the wooden fence in front of the only passage, and then led Olav and other cavalry into the eastern district. When Olav and others entered the eastern zone, there was another rumbling of horseshoes in the northeast, and the sound of the formation was obviously better than Olav by 2 or 3 times. Hudic frowned and said, "Are all the Danish cavalry chasing?" Olav swallowed and spit, and said, "I'm afraid there are 800 in less than 1,000. We attacked 3 times on the road and killed a lot of Danes." www.uxiaspit.com. They had to catch up with Red Eyes. Okay. We'll meet the Danish royal cavalry in an upright manner. Hudic snorted coldly. Under the dim sky, a black torrent of cavalry slowly appeared on the ground in the northeast. Their gallops brought up a large amount of smoke and dust, and it looked like a giant overwhelming the sky, and more than 90% of the soldiers in the eastern district did not see it. After this battle, the heartbeat keeps accelerating like a drum. The wrinkles in the corner of Hudic's eyes twitched with excitement, and he drew the sword from his waist and shouted, "Soldiers! Keep the pass, for the relatives and friends behind us, brothers and sisters. For our kindness. And the great Lord Hater. For our Icelandic Republic. For ourselves. Slaughter the offal of Denmark." Huskard, Haggard and others, as well as all the soldiers, raised their weapons and shouted, "Kill the offal of Denmark." Olav and the cavalry behind him also ignored the dry cough, and shouted, "Kill the Danish offal." When the sun goes down, it is always fast. The daylight in Iceland disappeared with the appearance of the Danish cavalry. However, the real battle and the baptism of blood and fire are ushered in Iceland at night. This baptism is a rare experience for the ancient land of Iceland, and it is the most important experience for the newly born country of the Free Republic of Iceland. The calculation will turn into a stream of spring water, leaving it to future generations to sigh. The error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com. Like the Rise of Iceland, please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. Chapter 246, The Siege of Copenhagen, 1. The North Sea was calm, and the sun shone on the sea. Olaf was lying on the deck, basking in the sun, lazy, but he was suffering incomparably since knowing that Iceland is already under attack by Denmark. Olaf has been unable to control his brain. He is always worried that Reykjavik will be captured and killed by his parents and relatives after the Danish army has attacked. Olaf wants to fly to Iceland right away. Fight side by side with father and brother, but reason and intuition told Olaf that taking the indigenous core to Iceland could not play a corresponding role, because the Danish navy besieged Reykjavik, even if the Vinland Sixth Army is comparable to Germany and France. The elite army, but the 18 warships and dozens of Kirk ships facing the powerful Danish navy can only be the result of falling into the sea, drowning and being killed by artillery shells. Olaf is very sensible. He understands that rushing to the huge Danish navy surrounding Reykjavik with a dozen warships and dozens of Kirk ships cannot be said to be useless. Only was fighting the fire after Olaf learned from Hans about the Danish invasion of Iceland. Although he wanted to go to the place where the Icelandic fathers and soldiers were combined to repel the Danish invaders, Olaf calmed down after the ship sailed into the North Sea. Calm down. Although his heart is still restless, Olaf is calm on the surface. He knows that as the commander-in-chief, his words and deeds will affect the next 2,000 people. At present, the more urgent things are, the more he must keep secrets, so that all the 6 legions under him will be kept secret. Full of confidence in Iceland's victory after calming down, Olaf immediately clarified the strategic policy to save Iceland, that is, surround Way and save Zhao. Denmark is a veteran Nordic power with a population of more than 2 million. Although it has experienced the raging massacre of German soldiers and mercenaries on the Jutland Peninsula in recent years, and its population has decreased significantly, it has stabilized at around 2 million after the defeat of the European War. Christian IV licked his wounds to restore his national strength, while emulating the Swedish players who took over the baton from his own hands, and also recruited soldiers in the country. Therefore, there is a regular army of more than 10,000 people. It takes more than 5,000 royal guards and mercenaries to form an army of more than 30,000 to attack Iceland. However, The United Kingdom of Denmark, which has two regions of Norway and Denmark, has only 2 million people, of which the males are close to 1 million at most, but nearly 20,000 local soldiers have been pooled, and the population ratio is already 1 in 50 to 60. Now, this is definitely a grift for a country that has been defeated in successive wars. It even temporarily gave up the livelihood of plantation, fishery, and industrial development, and made the choice of national warfare. Although Olaf does not know how many troops there are in Denmark, according to the current data, it is estimated that there will be no more than 5,000 people, or even less. Olaf feels that he wants to rescue Iceland and repel the Danish expeditionary force, the best choice. It was taking advantage of the opportunity of the Danish army to rush out and lead the army to attack Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. The domestic forces are empty. If there is an attack by the Icelandic army, I believe that Christian IV will recall the expeditionary force that attacked Iceland as soon as possible. If Olaf's 6 armies break Copenhagen and capture Christian IV, it will be complete. It was a big victory, but this possibility was not high, and Olaf didn't dare to imagine it. The Danish expedition to Iceland consisted of more than 80 large warships and 30,000 elite soldiers. Relying on the tens of thousands of Viking soldiers in Iceland and the more than 10,000 indigenous soldiers in Olaf's hands, they would not be opponents at all. Olaf was soberly aware leading troops to rescue Iceland is to hit the edge of the knife. Not only cannot save the father and them, but also put yourself in. However, when the Danish army is dispatched, the city's defense force is weak, and it has become a weak underbelly for yourself. As long as you lead the army to attack Denmark, the number one will be Copenhagen, even if it is just a vain threatening attack. 10,000 people and dozens of large and small ships are enough for Christian IV to panic. It is absolutely impossible for Magnus to put His Majesty the Old Father-in-law in a dangerous situation. The Danish army besieging Reykjavik will definitely return to the court, and the crisis in Iceland will alleviate surrounding way, and saving Zhao was the only and best way Olaf thought of. He sat up from the deck and snorted coldly. You can give me a siege of Reykjavik in Iceland, and I can give you a Copenhagen siege. As long as Olaf's fleet encircles and attacks the royal city of Denmark, the siege of Iceland will definitely be eased, and the neighboring Sweden is still the enemy. Gustav II is anxious for Denmark to make embarrassment and will never help. There is no response and mobilization. Denmark asked Britain for help. Charles I couldn't send a navy for a while. When the British Navy assembled the Danish expeditionary force, King Kin had already returned for 3 times. Olaf's preparation to operate the siege of Copenhagen is indeed a clever plan to relieve the pressure on Iceland and repel Denmark, but there is a very dangerous part of this plan, that is, to wait until the Danish expeditionary force returns to Ska, between Norway and Jutland. In the Glac Strait, it is very difficult for Olaf to escape. With more than 10,000 indigenous troops, a dozen warships, and dozens of Kirk ships, it is impossible to be an opponent of the Danish Navy. I am afraid that it will cost a lot to escape. If the reaction was slower to escape, after the Danish Navy returned to the narrower Kattegat Strait just east of Jutland, and the Kattegat Strait close to Copenhagen, Olaf fled to the east of the Baltic Sea and eventually abandoned the ship and hid in Poland. There is probably no way to survive on the land of countries such as Russia and Tsarist Russia. Olaf also realized in his heart that if he did not escape in time when he went to attack Copenhagen, the Danish expeditionary army who was blocked by the class and the army would risk being buried in the strait. It can be said that there is a great risk in the actual operation of siege and rescue Zhao. Crisis, but Olaf's inner suffering made him unable to give up. Under Olaf's order, the fleet headed north on the North Sea and entered the Skagerrak Strait along the west coast of Jutland. Along the way, the windmills that can be seen on the east coast have disappeared, and the fleet tuned in and moved southeast. Preparing to sail into the Kattegat Strait and head straight to Copenhagen, just south as the fleet entered the Kattegat Strait, merchant ships from the Netherlands, Britain, Denmark, Sweden and even Russia were able to see them one after another. These merchant ships were all merchants traveling to and from Baltic Sea cities. Olaf knew that his father was in the Baltic Sea when he was young. A frequent visitor, but he is about to enter the Baltic Sea for the first time. The dividing line between the Baltic Sea and the North Sea is the Sun Strait from Helsingør, Denmark to Copenhagen. Entering the Sun Strait means entering the Baltic Sea. When entering the Sun Strait, you must pay the toll set by the King of Denmark. This tax revenue generally accounts for to 30% of Denmark's annual income, but beginning in the previous year, Denmark has once again increased the road taxation, which has caused complaints among businessmen from all over the world. www.uxiaspit.com. At present, Denmark still maintains the posture of a Nordic power. According to Olaf, it is at least 3 times. Before the end of the 10 Years' War, both sides of the Sogn Strait belonged to Denmark, so it could also be blocked for tax collection. However, after decades, Christian IV wanted to suppress the rise of Sweden and chose to attack Sweden. The final outcome was the most powerful force. The navy was wiped out under the combined attack of the Netherlands and Sweden, east of the Sogn Strait. The territories on the side coast were permanently separated from Danish control because of being occupied by Sweden, and the future territory of Denmark was basically finalized after this defeat. Denmark is still too small in size and too dependent on the Sogn Strait, and there has not been a heroic hero. Higurashi Nishiyama is also operating normally. Huh? Christian IV. You want me to do Iceland as a step? Dreaming. I have to tear off your paper tiger mask. Olaf looked at the Sogn Strait that was getting closer and closer, looked at the tall and towering tower castles with the same architectural style on both sides of the east and west, knowing that he had reached the northernmost point of the strait and was also the narrowest tax collection place. The east bank here is called Helsingborg and the west bank is called Helsingør. The castle built on the east coast is small but the tower is tall. There are 2 bronze cannons on the tower. The west coast protrudes in a triangular shape, and the most prominent position stands a tall tower. Towering and huge castle. This castle is called Kronborg. The place where the Danish Navy has been collecting taxes on passing ships on the east and west coasts is the narrowest northern end of the Sonder Strait, which is Helsingborg on the east coast and Kronborg on the west coast. The error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com. Like the Rise of Iceland, please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. Chapter 247, The Siege of Copenhagen, 2. As he approached the Sogn Strait, Olaf knew that as an Icelander, he also had an army of savages and natives of unknown origin. Pretending to be a businessman was definitely not the Danish navy of Kronborg, so he could only prepare in advance, and immediately attacked after approaching, strive to conquer Kronborg and destroy the stationed Danish navy, Piku. Go and inform all the ships. The ships with cannons are ahead, and the Kirk ships without cannons are farther away. When we bomb Kronborg, the Kirk ships will wait for the opportunity to land ashore and seize Helsinki. Grid. Thousands of soldiers on the Kirk ship are handed over to you personally. Olaf stretched out his big hand and patted Piku on the shoulder, and said in a deep voice, "You must treat me Helsingør, don't shame me." After many years of fighting in Greenland and the experience of commanding the army and the people, Piku is no longer the slave boy of the year. He knelt down and said, "Please rest assured, master. Even if I die, I will occupy Helsingør. You must not delay your grand strategy." After speaking, Piku got up and walked quickly to the side of the ship, preparing to set down the small boat to command the soldiers on the Kirk ship. Olaf leaned out on the bow, looked at the boat in the distance, and shouted, "Piku, you will be the #1 berserker in Wenland, and I will personally celebrate your work." Piku kept going on the boat, and then the boat slowly disappeared into the Kirk Group. 18 warships had already received the order of the flag bearers at this time. All the ships were waiting. The soldiers in the ships moved the shells and gunpowder to the side of the artillery. The bosses of each ship also walked onto the deck and looked at the flagship at the forefront. Waiting for Olaf's order at any time. Tom is standing on the deck of the second ship, behind the flagship. He has put on his breastplate, with a long sword at his waist, and a musket in his arms. Behind him are dozens of elite Huronians from Wenland. The second person on the team, Likstrom, is the only person outside of Olaf and Piku who knows Olaf is going to go straight to Copenhagen to save Zhao. He is gearing up to do something big in the past 2 days, looking into the distance. Helsingør was getting closer, and he couldn't wait to hold the musket in his hand tightly. "Guys, keep your eyes open. When General Olaf sends out the signal, everyone will approach Kronborg and start shelling." Tom shook his red greasy hair and said sharply, "Helsingør can be regarded as a major military town formed by Denmark because of the Sonder Strait. Soldiers and navy who maintain the security of the strait and collect taxes are stationed here, which has led to the gradual prosperity of business. At present, it has become a population of 20 to 30,000 people." City Olaf's view of Helsingør became clearer and clearer. This city with some Gothic tall buildings and churches made Olaf squint at the crowds passing by the port, and the streets represent the prosperity of this area. But Kronborg, like a sharp knife protruding from the coastline, is the most eye-catching place. Kronborg is the foundation of the Sonder Strait, The Danish handle. It is also a branch base of the Danish Navy. It stands to reason that there should be many tall ships and soldiers, but Olaf only saw 3 of his own 18-gallon ships. Similar warships. There are more than a dozen small boats. Olaf beamed with joy and murmured to himself, "It seems that I guessed right. Denmark is really out of the nest. Even the ones holding the song straight are only 3 or 2 cats and puppies. The Danish naval power is really true. Empty. The 3-gallon warships and a dozen small boats are certainly not comparable to the 18 warships in Olaf's hands, but they can completely crush the weak eastern Baltic cities and ordinary merchants that lack warships. What's more, now Denmark's only strong neighbor, Sweden, has already penetrated into the German region and has no time to visit the Sonder Strait. Therefore, for the Danes, the only remaining naval power is still one of the best in the Baltic Sea. Finland's 18 large ships approached Helsingør, and the warships outside Kronborg port reacted instantly and collectively dispatched to greet them. The 3 largest Danish warships headed by them showed their black hole muzzles, and the flag bearers on the bows did not. Under the semaphore, the residents asked Olaf to identify himself and cooperate with the inspection. Olaf ordered the flag bearer to tell the Danes that his fleet was a Dutch armed warship, hoping to delay as a result. Less than 10 minutes later, Denmark seemed to lose patience and suddenly fired a few shells. Although the shells fell into the water a long way from Olaf's fleet, they still jumped off Olaf. "The Danes are intimidating us. They ask us to drop anchor and wait for their soldiers to get on the ship to check." By Vikings flag bearer turned and hurriedly told Olaf. Olaf wanted to order the fleet to attack, but after another thought, if he did it now, the Danish navy would definitely be able to escape a lot, and Copenhagen would get the news in advance to be prepared, in case Denmark organizes a large army to defend, and then conquer. Recruiting warships on the sea to help fight, I am afraid that not only will not be able to save Iceland, but also may encounter failure and death. Olaf's brain was spinning fast, constantly weighing the pros and cons, and finally he said in a deep voice, "Sorgale. You tell the Danes that we are willing to stop the ship and wait for them to board the ship for inspection and pay taxes." Sorgale raised the flag in his hand without speaking. After a while, the ship broke down. A Danish gallon ship approached Olaf's flagship. The Danish Navy of the Sword stepped onto the deck. Olaf smiled and said, "Do it." 70 or 80 Viking musketeers appeared on the deck instantly. Fire and smoke burst out of the muskets in their hands. The Danish soldiers were knocked down before they could react. The remaining Danish soldiers hurriedly raised their muskets and fired back, but not many people pulled the trigger. www.uxiaspit.com. Most of the Danish soldiers were pierced by the flying spears thrown by the warriors who rushed out in front of them. The skull died, and the remaining ones were also besieged and killed by the close warriors. The more than 40 Danish soldiers who walked to Olaf's flagship were all killed in less than 5 minutes. Olaf got up from the deck until there was no Dane standing on the deck, and snorted coldly, "The Danes, get on the boat and kill them all." Olaf's orders were cold and straightforward. He didn't even notice it. Now he is no longer resistant to the killing, but Olaf a few years ago still couldn't bear it. It can be seen that people's changes are always obscured and changed. Olaf's flagship is the most elite soldier in the Vinland 6th Army. There are also many guards composed of Olaf's private slaves. The total number is more than 200. They quickly jumped from the board rope to just react. On the coming Danish warship, they fought with the remaining 70 or 80 soldiers on board. Gunshots from Danish warships and Olaf's flagship shook the skies of the Song Strait, and the fighting that took place made the 2 Dutch merchant ships queuing south quickly turned around and fled. The remaining 2 large ships and other small ships of the Danish navy responded quickly. When Olaf's soldiers rushed onto the Danish warship, the Danish navy immediately approached Olaf's fleet, and the 2-gallon ships launched their cannons at the same time. The flagship and the warship behind bombarded the pass. The 2 Danish warships only had more than 20 heavy artillery pieces and a few light artillery pieces. These artillery fires may be amazing on flat ground, but they are commonplace on the sea. The error-free chapters of The Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com. Like The Rise of Iceland, please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of The Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. Chapter 248, The Siege of Copenhagen, 3. The Danish Navy had less than 30 rounds of artillery in a salvo. The shots of different sizes did not have a high hit rate due to the accuracy problem. Only 1 iron bullet smashed the deck of Olaf's flagship, and 2 hit the flanks. Olaf sat securely in the cabin, looked at everything outside, and said loudly, Order the fleet to fire on Danish ships and try to completely paralyze the Danish navy. After 2 rounds of shooting, 18 large ships quickly reacted, slanting their hulls and igniting artillery fires. Fire flashed from the dark muzzle. Accompanied by the thunderbolt of the clear sky, a total of more than 100 artillery pieces shot hot from the side of the 18 ships. Cannonballs. The movement of the gunpowder made the cannonballs roar through the sky, severely smashing the gangs, sides, decks, and even masts of Danish warships. Although Olaf's warship was far less accurate than the Danish navy's artillery due to insufficient gunners' experience, more than a dozen of more than 100 artillery shells hit 2 large ships, and 3 or 4 of the remaining small boats were 1 or 2 gunned. The 2 large Danish ships are sturdy and tall, and are hit by solid shells with the most damaged hulls. If they are not hit too many times and severely damaged, they may not affect the navigation of the ship, but the small ships cannot withstand artillery over 24 pounds. 1 shell can make a 2-foot diameter hole in a small boat. If it hits the mast, it will end in an instant. Olaf's fleet had already made sufficient preparations. Although the gunners were not good at their heads, they were defeated by the number. After 7 or 8 rounds of bombardment with the Danish warships, the 2 Danish warships were wounded and stumbling. As for the Danish navy's small ships, 3 were sunk and 7 were paralyzed. The rest were scared and fled to the south. However, Olaf had long been wary of the Danish navy's escape, and the 3 large ships were chasing after it with full sails. More than 10 Kirk ships lurking behind the big ship also chased up like an arrow from the string. 2 hours passed quickly. After the defeat of the Danish navy, Olaf ordered the army to bomb Kronborg, and the remaining Kirk ships landed to attack Helsingør on the west side of Kronborg. Helsingør has 2 piers, north and south, but Kronborg is in the middle of the pier. This huge bastion has hundreds of Danish soldiers stationed, and there are bronze cannons that can be repelled by the sea attacking the land. However, the Danish soldiers in Kronborg did not expect anyone to attack at the weakest moment of the Danish navy, and there were more than a dozen large warships, facing the shelling of more than a dozen warships under Olaf. Kronborg completely unable to counterattack, the shells fired were blocked by the Galen ship entering the northern pier, and then a steady stream of inland soldiers landed on the shore, and finally, under the leadership of the officer, killed Helsingør on the west side. Helsingør was just an ordinary city in Europe in the 17th century, with a small scale and a small population. And the residents were mainly fishermen. When Olaf's army rushed into the city, there were no pedestrians on the streets, and everyone hid in their homes, and blocked the doors and windows, hiding behind shivering Piku, Tom, Yaluki and others rode moose or horses, and when they saw each other from a distance, they waved their hands. Piku knew that there were only 3 legions in this landing operation, so he whispered to the guards around him, and ordered, "Go and tell the other 2 legions. General Olaf ordered us to clean up Helsingør. All wealth and food must be snatched back. As for the resistance, it will be killed." After receiving Olaf's order, the 3 legion commanders rushed into the streets of Helsingør with their respective legions. The soldiers kicked and knocked open the doors and windows of the people, rushed in and burned, killed and looted like bandits. The beautiful seaside town instantly turned into purgatory on earth. The sounds of roars, cries, collisions, gunfire, etc. converged into noisy sound, but in the eyes of Olaf, who stood still on the flagship, he knew that he was just playing a song for the Danes. Symphony of Destiny. Although the Danes and the Icelanders have the same language and species and have an ancestor, the Danes have never regarded Icelanders as their own. In the history of enslaving Iceland for hundreds of years, Icelandic people have been squeezed by Danish governor officials, and even killed many Icelanders by force. With a deep hatred accumulated over hundreds of years, and the life and death struggle of the past 2 years, coupled with the threatening siege of Iceland, Olaf did not dare to have the slightest hesitation and kindness at all. He could only let his natives of the Vinland 6th Army. Using their wildness and cruelty, the soldiers can not only weaken the strength of Denmark, but also deter the Danish rulers, making them understand that Iceland is not easy to deal with. The sun soon went down, and the endless stream of merchant ships in the Song Strait seemed to have heard the wind, and no one could be seen. After the sky gradually darkened, the soldiers of the Vinland Army Corps who had looted Helsingør came back with torches. They were full of blood and returned with a lot of bags. Olaf was not interested in knowing what they did. What kind of evil is just ordering all soldiers to continue attacking Kronborg, which has been bombarded? Kronborg fell completely after supporting it for an hour. All the Danish soldiers in the fort were killed by Vinland soldiers, and the estimated number after death was about 800. After the sky was completely dark, 3 large ships and a dozen Kirk ships chasing the escaped Danish navy also rushed back. Salrak, Bren, and Polly reported the battle to Olaf after hunting down 12 Danish ships were sunk, 231 Danish soldiers were killed and drowned, and nearly 200 were captured, but 3 ships also escaped. Olaf rubbed his temples. He knew that war was not a game and could not be without any problems. He had obviously accepted the fact that he had no mercy to wipe out the Danish navy. After a while, Olaf received the death and injury data of his corps reported by Tom and others. In naval and land battles, UU read www. A total of 65 people were killed in the UUCanchu.com Wetland army, 8 were seriously injured, and 80 were slightly injured. Today's fortified battle, Olaf felt it was a victory, because the Danish army was killed and captured more than 1,000, while Vinland had only more than 100 people. The exchange ratio of 1 to 10 was a complete battle. The victory, although the strength of the victorious side of this battle itself is more than 10 times that of the Danish navy. Olaf was thinking about the pros and cons of this battle, and at the same time waiting for the return of Tom and others who had searched Kronborg and other places. Suddenly the self-ringing bell in the cabin remembered. Olaf took a look with the help of candlelight, and found that it was already 8 o'clock in the evening, and Olaf's stomach was groaning. Hunger made Olaf put everything down and ordered the whole army to start a meal. So the soldiers set up an iron pot on the ruins of Kronborg or on the pier, lighted the wood, and cooked a large pot of meat with the fresh vegetables and meat there rated. Soup and fresh bread. After dinner, Olaf walked onto the deck and looked at Helsingør, which was like a ghost town on the shore in the distance. He trembled in his heart, and finally sighed, "The blame can only be blamed on your Majesty Christian IV." After a while, the 6 Legion commanders headed by Piku, Tom, and Yaluki came to Olaf for a routine military meeting. The battle was over. The losses and gains were discussed at the meeting, and the gains and losses were also analyzed. In the end, Olaf gave verbal commendations to people who performed well, and said that after the end of the war, they would redeem qualitative rewards, such as encouraging one's status, giving honors and so on. The error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinshuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinshuhagenovel.com. Like the Rise of Iceland, please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. Chapter 249, The Siege of Copenhagen, 4. At the military meeting after dinner, all the commanders disagreed with the strength of the Danes, because today's victory was easy. However, Olaf still poured cold water on everyone. He believed that the strength of the Vinland Expeditionary Force and the Kronborg Navy was too big, and the naval forces stationed in Helsingborg on the east coast of the Song Strait knew that the west coast was attacked but did not support, although it is more likely that the strength is not as strong as Kronborg, but it is also likely to focus on the overall situation and has already gone to Copenhagen to report. At the end of the meeting, Olaf told everyone that this war is related to Iceland's century-old rise and fall, and is related to everyone's wealth. Therefore, they must be prepared and attach great importance to prevent Copenhagen from organizing armed defense and dealing with himself and others in advance. Raf asked the fleet to go south with all its strength to attack Copenhagen tonight. It took more than half a day to win Helsingør and Kronborg. Olaf and the Legion commanders were more confident. They formulated the slogan and strategic goal for the southward operation, that is, break the city of Copenhagen and capture Christian alive, 4th generation. All the soldiers of the Vinland Legion returned to the ship, and went to sleep in the cabin and clothes. Vinland's fleet was still heading south at night. Although Olaf and other captains had never been to the Song Strait, the night was pretty good today. They went all the way south along the west side of the strait until 4 o'clock in the morning. Olaf, who had just fallen asleep, was awakened by Piku. "Master, Copenhagen is coming. I also took the prisoners we took to sea just now. They said that it was Amager Island in Copenhagen." Olaf rubbed his face and asked, "What does Amager mean?" Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark, but it is the eastern end of the island of Zealand, which accounts for a small proportion of the land area of Denmark. The Danish capital was built here to contain the Song Strait and control the outlet of the Baltic Sea. Olaf and others have never been to Denmark, let alone the topography of Copenhagen, but the Danish soldiers captured in Helsingør in the afternoon are very familiar with Copenhagen. According to the prisoner's account, a much smaller island of Amager was adjacent to Copenhagen. The strait between the two islands was narrow like a big river. The pier outside Copenhagen was built at the eastern end of Amager. However, Copenhagen also has a few smaller piers, and another naval base, Karenburg, was built in Shanghai on the northeast coast of Copenhagen. Olaf and Pico also learned about Copenhagen based on the simple sketches drawn by the prisoners. Olaf became scared afterwards. He felt that his treatment of the war was too trivial. He even took the liberty to come to Copenhagen when he thought of attacking Copenhagen, but he didn't do enough homework in preparation, and he was not even competent in collecting intelligence at the very least. Fortunately, the Danish naval forces remained too weak. Otherwise, the raid yesterday afternoon may have killed more than 10,000 people in Wenland. Seeing that it was already 4 a.m. and knowing that the fleet was approaching Copenhagen, Olaf was urgent and ordered the fleet to drop anchor, and then asked Tom and other legion leaders to board the ship and continue to study the attack plan before leaving last night. Olaf and others had made a plan, but Olaf now thinks which plan is very vague, and he doesn't know much about Copenhagen's geography, garrison, etc., and now needs to continue to improve according to the drawings of the Danish prisoners. In addition to the Kalundborg on the northeast coast such as Jabena, there is also a small island in front of the harbor of Copenhagen and Amager. There is a Trekna fort built on this castle with cannons and Danish soldiers. There are several medium and small warships, which are Denmark's last line of defense to protect Copenhagen. We ignored Kalundborg and Treknaborg last night. If we rush into it, we might suffer a lot, Olaf said with a breath. The red-haired Tom scratched his red-bearded chin and said, yes. Kalundborg and Treknaborg are like two sharp knives guarding Copenhagen. If we want to attack the city of Copenhagen, we must first conquer the castle. Solrak has caught a cold for some reason in the past few days, and his face became thinner. He coughed slightly and said, we have sufficient warships and a large number of troops. It is entirely possible to give Kalundborg and Trekna fort one by one. Flatten, and then land to attack Copenhagen, eulogy had devise, and he said solemnly, Copenhagen is the royal capital of Denmark. There are hundreds of thousands of Danes living here, as well as nobles and wealthy businessmen. What if Christian IV recruits nobles and wealthy businessmen to form an army to resist us? Maybe we have not won the two castles before the Copenhagen militia attacked us. Yaluki's reminder made everyone feel nervous. They knew that the nobles and wealthy merchants had servants and guards. Many high-ranking nobles even had private armies. If Christian IV ordered them, they would be organized. The royal capital of Denmark, with a population of hundreds of thousands, is likely to erupt with a powerful combat force against the Vinland army. Olaf knows that he can only try to be stable now. As long as Copenhagen is besieged and the Danes feel the tension and urgency, the Danish army besieging Reykjavik will be transferred back. Relying on the more than 10,000 indigenous coalition forces in hand to conquer Copenhagen is also a delusion. It is better to retain the most basic strategic purpose. We can't take risks because of yesterday's victory. We have to know that our power is still a little weak in front of Denmark, so we can't attack the mainland of Copenhagen. We only need to protect Copenhagen's fortresses such as Kalundborg and Treknaborg, unplug the Danish defense force and let them show their soft bodies. Danish talents who don't know our actual combat strength and strength will panic. The nobles in Copenhagen will be afraid, and then put Magnus call back to protect them, Olaf said, looking around for a week, and said in a deep voice, remember that our purpose is to relieve the crisis in Iceland, so let's take down Kalundborg first. Olaf made the decision. Everyone can only accept whatever they think. Although the militant Pico and Tom still have unrealistic illusions about the capture of Copenhagen, the remaining generals all understand Olaf's painstaking efforts. Several legion commanders left from Olaf's flagship, returned to their ships, and began to give orders to prepare for battle. The fleet of the Wenland Expeditionary Corps quickly pulled up its anchors, and then moved quickly southward after being full of sails as Olaf's army was advancing towards Kalundborg. Northeast of Copenhagen, there was a rider on the streets of the east town in the Hillerød district, 70 miles west of Helsingør, which had become a dead ruin. The Danish knight on horses. This knight is wearing a half-length plate armor, and the helmet is inlaid with the golden lion emblem of the Danish royal family, which proves that he is the general officer of the Royal Guard. The morning light from the east spilled down the streets of Hillerød. The officer's horse's hooves awakened the residents on both sides of the street. People had just woke up. Professional patrol militiamen had heard the news. Who is the Royal Gendarmerie? The officer swallowed and spit, and said in a dumb voice, I am Captain Kronborg Durden. My horse can't run anymore. I'll change my horse. I'm going to Frederick Castle. I have military affairs. It is important to report to His Majesty the King. The error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com. Like the Rise of Iceland, please collect it, The new book-age novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. Chapter 250, The Siege of Copenhagen, 5. The hilliard area in the north of Zealand is the sapphire-like Slotsen Lake. On 3 small islands in the center of the lake, there are the beautiful, luxurious and majestic royal palaces of all European countries. Frederick Castle Palace. Frederiksberg Palace covers an area not large in royal palaces in European countries, but its architectural style is unique. There is only a fairly wide stone bridge leading from the shore to the Frederiksberg Palace on the small island in the middle of the lake. After entering the first island through the stone bridge, you will see the wide corridors and the tall walls, houses and buildings on both sides. Shot hole. This is obviously the first castle to surround the palace. From the stone bridge behind the fortress island, you can ascend to the second island. The latter 2 islands form a beautiful palace with blue tiles and red bricks, and a fountain square with bronze statues of Poseidon and Valkyrie Lucian, gardens and other buildings. It's like the fairy tale world has come to reality. The master of Denmark, Christian IV, lives on the 3rd floor of the palace behind the sprinkler square. It is already early July, the weather in Denmark has become warm, and the palace garden is full of flowers and fragrance. General Magnus and Deputy General Staff Officer Kormafo's report last week has been sent to the palace. Christian IV learned that the Danish army has invaded the city of Reykjavik and is in the eastern part of Reykjavik. Heir and other rebels are engaged in street fighting, and all signs indicate that the victory of the Danish army is just around the corner. The Icelandic rebellion is about to be captured, and Christian IV feels that his face has also recovered. These days, he will spend a long time in the garden early in the morning and sometimes call his mistress, but this morning, there were only 2 gardeners and gardeners timidly tidying up the flowers. They heard the sound of broken porcelain upstairs and the roar of His Majesty, which let them know that His Majesty was angry. Kronborg can't hold on for 2 hours? Trash. Iceland is being besieged by Magnus. How come dozens of warships appear under our islands? Really, the Rose Hall is luxuriously decorated. The oriental rhino horns and African ivory are hung together with the famous paintings of Paris. The exquisite porcelain and jade from the Far East Cirrus can be seen everywhere on the table in front of the long table covered with the gold silk tablecloths. Christian IV, wearing a woolen short robe, was panting with an iron face. Under his feet were golden fried fish, pudding, milk and other food, mixed with food. It was broken glass tableware and ceramic teacups, and a pair of silver knives and forks on a colorful blanket not far away, stained with the milk and royal jelly in the milky white and golden yellow. Christian IV lost his former demeanor, his eyes widened, and the blue veins on his forehead were raised. He gritted his teeth and looked at the young officer who was kneeling on the ground not far away, and sternly asked, "Duladin, you are my confidant. I remember your grandfather was just a knight, right?" Duladin swallowed dryly, and said dumbly, "Yes, my honorable majesty." The minister's grandfather is only a knight in the country. The minister was trained to become a captain of the Danish Navy because of his loyalty. Beyond the status of ancestors, the minister will never forget the gift of your majesty. In this era without official ranks, the gold content of a captain is no less than that of a general. As the highest person in charge of Kronborg, Duladin is already in the middle and upper ranks of the Danish Navy, but he came here in a hurry. But when Christian IV was enjoying breakfast, he told him that yesterday the Icelandic thieves suddenly attacked Kronborg. Dozens of warships and thousands of fighters captured Helsingør within 2 hours and killed a large number of citizens and Danish fighters. Christian IV couldn't believe it at all, but he didn't think Duladin had the need to deceive himself. Christian IV instantly became violent and nervous. He roared and broke everything in front of him, and at the same time ate with himself. The Minister of the Interior and the Minister of Finance, who had breakfast sent to find out the situation after hearing the answer to his casual questioning, Christian IV said coldly, "I gave you everything beyond what you deserved, but you caused me to lose Kronborg. Iceland is just cold and remote and sparsely populated. In a poor place, even if Heir has a small colonial island called Vinland in America, it is impossible to support dozens of warships and thousands of fighters, not to mention that he has already raised a few in Iceland. There are thousands of fighters. Is Heir's colony in America bigger and richer than my Denmark, because the news of the expansion of Wendland's territory has not spread in Europe? Christian IV apparently does not believe or know about Wendland's expansion, and coupled with his fixed impression of Wendland and Iceland, he did not expect Wendland to be guided by Olaf. He did not know that even the royal jelly he loved to eat, said to be obtained from Africa, was actually a specialty of Vinland. You are talking nonsense and exaggerating the power of the Icelandic thieves. Even if Hader's men attacked Kronborg Kanoha, it is impossible to have dozens of warships and thousands of soldiers. Christian IV shook his head and glared at Duladin. Duladin's face flushed, and he trembled. Your Majesty. What the minister said is true. The group of people who attacked Kronborg were all well-equipped soldiers. Their complexion looked like Caribbean Indians. The leader was not. Few are tall Nordic men. I hear what they say is the Icelandic language. Your Majesty. Christian IV waved his hand and said, you first step back and wait. I have sent someone to investigate in Helsingr. If everything is true, I will forgive you for your sins. If you exaggerate your enemies in order to reduce your own guilt, talk nonsense, I will send you to the gallows. Duladin withdrew dejectedly. Christian IV waited restlessly in the room, got up and turned around in random circles, and cursed Hader and Iceland while talking to himself. Time passed bit by bit, and when it was noon, the three ministers walked in quickly. With an expression of panic on everyone's face, Christian IV stretched out his hand to grab the lead man, and said, Ulfi, how is it? Ulfi was promoted to Minister of the Exchequer this year. Although he relied on the favor of the king's father-in-law and the support of his family, he was indeed smart and capable. Holding the cold palms of Christian IV in both hands, Ulfi's handsome face frowned slightly. Softly said, Your Majesty, take care of your body. Are you telling me that what Duratin is telling is the truth? Christian IV continued to ask. Hey, yes, Your Majesty. Ulfi said with a change of face and drooped his eyelids. We didn't get to Helsingr and saw many women and children, King Hilarid, fleeing. They told me yesterday. The Icelanders are taking the evil deeds of the Indian soldiers, and I am afraid that all the males in Helsingr have been killed. Hiss. Christian IV took a breath and almost fell. This year, 55 years old, he felt the aging and weakness of his body for the first time. Ulfi helped his father-in-law to sit down, and several ministers continued to comfort Your Majesty. After a long time, Christian IV straightened up and asked, Where are the thieves in Iceland now? They are obviously going to attack Copenhagen. Our expeditionary army is besieging Reykjavik. This group of Icelandic troops is going to take revenge. Your Majesty, you must order Magnus to come back in him. Christian IV was not sure for a moment. He waved his hand and said, Hurry up and prepare. We will take the royal guards to Copenhagen immediately. Ulfi and the others hurriedly retreated. The Frederick Castle quickly became lively like boiling water. Everyone hurried in and out. The horse-drawn carts and ox carts requisitioned in the Hilarid area were also full of food. The materials were prepared in front of the stone bridge at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Christian IV rode out of the palace gate in a uniform, riding an Arabian horse. Behind him was Duratin, who had been washed clean, and he was also riding a yellow-haired mixed horse. There were 4 ministers waiting outside the palace gate. Ulfi came over first and said, Your Majesty. The soldiers from Helsingborg and the commissioner from Copenhagen came just now, saying that they had already gone to Copenhagen to report last night. Copenhagen. The mayor and the 2 legion commanders who were stationed were all ready for battle this morning. This morning the Icelandic thieves really appeared outside Kalundborg. With the support of the whole city of Copenhagen, the Icelandic thieves did not attack Kalundborg at all. At present, the defenders of Kalundborg are still entangled with the thieves of Iceland. Everyone hopes that Your Majesty can return to the city as soon as possible to preside over the overall situation. Christian IV nodded. His face was heavy. He frowned, and asked in a low voice, Ulfi, do you think we need to call Magnus back? The Icelandic bandit to attack Kalundborg deserves to influence us. Is there a plan to conquer Iceland? Ulfi's face remained unchanged, but she was a little nervous and excited. He pretended to think for a while before saying, Duladin is our young Danish general. Over the years, he has not eliminated the pirates and made great contributions to the country, but we are songed. Kronborg, the first knife in the strait, was captured by Icelandic pirates within 2 hours. What does this mean? Icelandic pirates should not be underestimated. They also have 18 Galen-type and Clark-type warships, all equipped with heavy cannons, and half of the thousands of soldiers are musketeers. This is enough to go to the southern coast of the Baltic Sea to fight German soldiers. Copenhagen is the largest city with developed commerce, a large population, and many foreign businessmen. It is still the face of Denmark. www.uxiaspit.com. Although the remaining power should be able to resist the Icelandic pirates, but in case they are small pirates, rushing into the city can cause major riots. And letting a few fires cause some damage. Not only will we lose the face of Denmark, I am afraid it will take several years to come back to life. Ulfi is very smart. He and Magnus and his brother-in-law have been fighting for power in recent years, and they have not dealt with each other. Therefore, they are also worried that Magnus will take credit for establishing Iceland. Now his father-in-law asks himself, although Ulfi wants to persuade him Magnus was transferred back, but he didn't know that it was just guiding Christian IV to think about possible risks. Christian IV really swayed even more. He hesitantly said, Iceland will stay in the North Sea honestly and we can attack again at any time, but this horrible group of Icelandic pirates may not be able to do anything. It is not a long-term thing to always passively defend. Magnus must be transferred back to have a strong enough navy and troops to destroy them. Muttering, Christian IV confirmed his thoughts in his heart and ordered, Ulfi, send a ship to Iceland, urgently summon Magnus to bring his troops back, and block the Icelandic pirates in the Song Strait in time. Inside, all annihilated, Ulfi's mouth turned slightly, and he bowed and said, Okay, Your Majesty, I will do it now. After Ulfi retired temporarily, Christian IV pretended to check his more than 1,000 guards, and then got into his own carriage and ordered the departure. The Danish king's guards and horse-drawn carriages and ox carriage waited for everything. Leaving the Frederiksberg Palace in Hillerød mightily, the error-free chapters of the Rise of Iceland will continue to be updated on zinsuhagenovel.com. There are no advertisements in the site. Please collect and recommend zinsuhagenovel.com. Like the Rise of Iceland, please collect it. The new book Hage Novel Net of the Rise of Iceland has the fastest update speed. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.